My son banned me from his wedding but sent me a bill for $500,000 to pay for his party and honeymoon. He even cheekily added, "Be thankful I let you contribute." I just smiled and turned his dream into a nightmare. I am Montgomery Hayes, 68 years old, and I have spent my life building bridges, quite literally. As the founder of Hayes Infrastructure, I started with a shovel in my hand and ended up reshaping the skyline of Chicago. My hands are calloused, my skin is dark, and my bank account is substantial, though I have never felt the need to wear my wealth on my sleeve. I raised my son Tyrell to have the best of everything I never had. I sent him to private schools, paid for his Ivy League education, and sheltered him from the harsh realities of being a black man in America. Perhaps that was my mistake. I thought I was giving him a head start, but instead I seemed to have crippled his character. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. The morning that changed everything did not start with a storm or a bad omen. It started with the aggressive ping of a notification on my phone while I was drinking my black coffee looking out over the city I helped build. It was an email from Sinclair Wedding Planners. The subject line simply read, "Final invoice for Hayes Sinclair nuptials." I frowned. I knew Tyrell was marrying Victoria Sinclair, a girl from a family that claimed to be Connecticut royalty, but smelled faintly of desperation. I had told Tyrell I would help out, but I had not signed off on anything specific. I opened the attachment. My eyes scanned the document, and for a moment I thought my vision was failing. It was a 3-page itemized list that read like a ransom note. Venue rental at the Newport Castle, $150,000. Custom Vera Wang bridal gown, $25,000. Imported Ecuadorian orchids, $40,000. A 2-week honeymoon in the Maldives first class, $50,000. The numbers blurred together until I reached the bottom line. $512,000. $500,000 for a single day. I scrolled down looking for an explanation, and there it was. A note from my son Tyrell. It was brief, casual, and utterly detached from reality. It read, "Dad, please wire the full amount by Friday. The Sinclairs are getting anxious about the deposits. Don't let me down." He did not ask. He did not say please. He demanded $500,000 like he was asking for lunch money. I felt a tightening in my chest, the same feeling I used to get when a load-bearing wall was about to crack. I put the phone down on the marble countertop, my hand trembling slightly. Not from age, but from a rage I had not felt in years. I looked at the photo of my late wife Lucille on the mantel. She would have laughed at this. She would have told Tyrell to get a job, but Lucille was gone, and I was left with a son who treated me like an ATM. Just as I was about to dial Tyrell's number and give him a lecture on the value of $1, the doorbell rang. It was a courier service, priority overnight delivery. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and textured. It looked expensive. I signed for it, thinking perhaps this was the formal invitation. Maybe the email was just a logistical error, a clumsy way of asking for help before the polite request arrived. I used a letter opener to slice the seal. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cardstock embossed with the Sinclair family crest. I adjusted my glasses and began to read. The words were typed precise and cold as ice. "Dear Mr. Hayes, due to the limited capacity of our historic venue and the need to maintain a strict aesthetic coherence for the photography and the comfort of the Sinclair family guests, we regret to inform you that you will not be required to attend the ceremony or the reception. We know you would feel out of place among the senators and dignitaries. We will of course send you a photo album after the event. Please consider your financial contribution as your presence." I read it again. Aesthetic coherence. Out of place. They were not just uninviting me, they were erasing me. My son was marrying a white woman whose family did not want a 68-year-old black man in their wedding photos, no matter how much money he had in the bank. And Tyrell, my own flesh and blood, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the boy I had sat beside in hospitals and graduation halls, had allowed this. He had chosen their aesthetic over his own father. The silence in my penthouse was deafening. I walked over to the window. Down below, people were rushing to work, building, creating, living. Up here, I was being discarded like a piece of scaffolding after the building is finished. The pain was sharp, agonizing. It felt like a physical blow to the gut. I sat down heavily on my leather armchair. For 5 minutes, I just stared at the wall. I thought about the overtime shifts I worked in the freezing rain so Tyrell could have braces. I thought about the time I missed my own anniversary dinner to drive him to a debate tournament. I thought about the unconditional love I had poured into him, hoping it would make him a good man. Clearly, love was not enough. Then the pain shifted. It cooled. It hardened. It turned into something else entirely. It turned into the cold, calculated focus of a structural engineer spotting a flaw in the blueprint. If they wanted me to be invisible, I would be invisible. If they wanted my money without my presence, they had misunderstood the fundamental laws of business. You do not get the investment if you fire the investor. I picked up my phone again. The shaking had stopped. My fingers were steady as I opened my banking application. I navigated to the supplementary credit card accounts. I had given Tyrell a platinum card for emergencies and incidental expenses. I watched the screen load. Pending transaction. Porsche dealership, Chicago. $50,000. Deposit. My jaw tightened. He was buying a car. He had just sent me a bill for $500,000, banned me from his wedding, and was currently standing in a dealership buying a Porsche with my money. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its sheer lack of shame. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone against the wall. I pressed the contact button for my private banker, a man who had been managing my assets for 20 years. He answered on the first ring. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. How can I help you today?" I kept my voice low-level and devoid of emotion. "Listen to me carefully, James. I need you to execute a code red on all family accounts attached to my primary holdings, specifically the cards issued to Tyrell Hayes." There was a pause on the other end. "Code red, sir. That implies a security breach or theft. Are you sure that will freeze everything instantly? The cards will be declined immediately." I looked at the letter on the table. Aesthetic coherence. "I am sure, James. Whatever transaction is pending right now, kill it, decline it, and lock the accounts. No overrides without my voice authorization. And James, freeze the emergency cash reserve fund as well. All of it." "Understood, Mr. Hayes. Executing now." I hung up. I watched the screen of my phone. A notification popped up from the banking app Alert. Transaction declined. Porsche, Chicago. Card status frozen. I imagined the scene. Tyrell standing there, probably wearing one of those Italian suits I paid for, smiling at the salesman handing over the card with that arrogant flick of the wrist. And then the pause, the confusion, the humiliation. I picked up my coffee cup. It was cold now, but I didn't mind. I took a slow sip, the bitter taste settling on my tongue. They wanted a wedding without me. They wanted my money without my face. They wanted to erase Montgomery Hayes. I leaned back in my chair and a small, cold smile touched my lips. The bill for $500,000 lay on the table next to the rejection letter. I folded the rejection letter neatly and placed it in my pocket. The bill I left on the table. Let's see how much aesthetic coherence they can afford when the bank runs dry. My phone started to ring. The caller ID flashed Tyrell. I watched it ring. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. I reached out, silenced the ringer, and turned the phone face down. The lesson had just begun. The air inside the Porsche dealership smelled like money. It was a specific scent, a mixture of conditioned leather, premium tire rubber, and the expensive cologne worn by salesmen who work on commission. From where I stood watching through the glass facade before I made my entrance, I could see Tyrell. He looked like a prince in his tailored suit, his hand resting casually on the hood of a midnight blue 911 Carrera. It was a beautiful machine. It was a machine built for men who had earned their leisure, not for boys who were playing dress-up with their father's credit line. Victoria was standing next to him. She looked bored. She was checking her reflection in the side mirror, adjusting a strand of her blonde hair, completely indifferent to the engineering marvel in front of her. To her, this car was just another accessory like a handbag or a pair of shoes, something to match her outfit for the wedding photos. I watched as the salesman, a man with a smile so bright it looked painful, handed the payment terminal to Tyrell. My son pulled out the platinum card with a flourish. It was a gesture I had seen him practice in the mirror when he was a teenager. He tapped the card on the machine, his face the picture of arrogant confidence. He was already looking at the keys in the salesman's hand, mentally driving the car off the lot. Then came the silence. It was not a quiet silence. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that sucked the air out of the room. The machine let out a low, flat beep. The salesman looked at the screen, frowned, and tapped a few buttons. He smiled apologetically at Tyrell. It seems the chip did not read correctly, sir. Let us try that again. Tyrell laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. Of course. Technology, right? Go ahead. He inserted the card this time. He typed in his PIN. I knew the PIN. It was his birthday. The machine thought for a second, processing the request, reaching out to the bank servers where my order to freeze the assets was waiting like a trap door. Declined. The word flashed on the small screen in red letters. The salesman's smile faltered. The warmth in his eyes dropped by 10 degrees. It has been declined again, sir. Perhaps you have another form of payment. Tyrell's face went from confident to pale in a heartbeat. He looked at the card as if it had betrayed him. That is impossible. That card has a practically unlimited limit. My father owns Hayes Infrastructure. Run it again. Victoria stopped looking at her reflection. She turned to Tyrell, her eyes narrowing. Tyrell, what is going on? People are looking. And they were. The other customers in the showroom, men in business suits and women with diamond tennis bracelets, had stopped their quiet conversations. They were watching the young couple at the front desk. They smelled the blood in the water. There is nothing the rich hate more than a pretender, someone who tries to enter their club without paying the dues. Run it again. Tyrell snapped, his voice rising. The salesman sighed. He was no longer the friendly guide to luxury. He was now the gatekeeper. Sir, I have run it 3 times. The bank has flagged the card as lost or stolen. I am afraid I have to keep the card. Keep it. You cannot keep my card. Do you know who I am? Victoria stepped away from him. It was a small step, maybe only 6 inches, but it spoke volumes. She was distancing herself from the failure. She crossed her arms, her face flushing pink, not with sympathy for her fiancé, but with embarrassment for herself. Tyrell, fix this. This is humiliating. Tyrell scrambled for his phone. He was sweating now. I could see the beads of perspiration forming on his forehead. I am calling my father. This is just a glitch. A stupid banking glitch. I watched him dial. I felt my own phone vibrate in my pocket. I did not answer. I let it ring. I watched him panic. I watched him realize that the safety net he had bounced on his entire life was gone. He looked around the room desperate, and that is when he saw me. I was not in a limousine. I was not in a luxury sedan. I had pulled up to the curb right in front of the glass doors in my 2015 Ford F-150. It was rusted around the wheel wells. The bed was scratched and dented from hauling lumber and bags of cement. It was a working man's truck covered in a fine layer of dust from the construction site I had visited earlier that morning. It was the truck that built his inheritance. And it was the ugliest thing in that pristine parking lot. I stepped out of the truck. I was wearing my work boots and a simple flannel shirt. I pushed open the glass doors and the bell chimed. Every head turned. They looked at the old black man in work clothes entering their sanctuary of wealth. Tyrell's eyes went wide. Dad, what are you doing here? And why did you bring that truck? You are parking in the loading zone. I walked straight up to the desk. The salesman looked at me, then at Tyrell, trying to connect the dots. I am here because you called me Tyrell, or you tried to. Tyrell looked at the salesman, then at Victoria, then back at me. His humiliation was morphing into anger. Dad, the card is not working. Tell this guy to unfreeze it. And why are you driving that junk? Victoria is standing right here. You are making us look like trash. The audacity of the boy was incredible. He was drowning, and he was criticizing the life raft because it wasn't painted gold. Victoria looked at me with open disdain. She wrinkled her nose as if I brought the smell of wet cement into the room with me. Mr. Hayes, really? We are trying to conduct business here. Tyrell was buying this as a wedding gift for us. I laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound. A gift for you? With my money. That is not a gift, Victoria. That is theft. Tyrell stepped forward, getting in my face. He was taller than me now, but he had none of my substance. Dad, stop it. Just unlock the card. We have the wedding rehearsal in 2 days. We need this car for the exit photos. It matches the color scheme. The color scheme. There it was again. I looked him dead in the eye. I thought I was banned, Tyrell. I thought I did not fit the aesthetic. Tyrell flinched. He lowered his voice to a hiss. That was just for the ceremony. You know how Victoria's family is. They are traditional. We were trying to spare your feelings. Spare my feelings. I pointed a calloused finger at his chest. You sent me a bill for $500,000 and told me to stay home. And now you want to use my money to buy a Porsche to impress people who think I am not good enough to breathe the same air as them." The showroom was silent. Everyone was listening. The salesman was pretending to type on his computer, but his ears were burning red. "My money is good enough for the engine, but my face isn't good enough for the photo. Is that it?" I asked, my voice rising just enough to carry to the back of the room. Tyrell looked around frantically. "Dad, please, lower your voice. You are making a scene." "I am not making a scene, Tyrell. I am making a point. You want to live a champagne life on a beer budget, and I am the one buying the beer. Well, the bar is closed." Victoria scoffed. She grabbed her purse. "This is ridiculous, Tyrell. I am going to the spa. Call me when you have handled your father." She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving him standing there alone. She did not even look back. That should have been a warning to him. That should have been the moment he realized she only loved what he could provide, not who he was. But he was too blind to see it. He turned his anger on me. "You chased her away. Are you happy now? You are ruining everything." I folded my arms. "I am saving you from bankruptcy, son. You do not have the money for this car. I do. And I am not buying it." Tyrell's face crumpled. He looked like the little boy who dropped his ice cream cone, but instead of sadness, there was a viciousness in his eyes I had never seen before. He knew he could not win this with logic. He knew he could not win this with authority. So he reached into the darkest part of his arsenal. He pulled out a weapon he knew would pierce my armor. He took a step closer, his voice shaking with feigned emotion. "Mom would be ashamed of you." The air left my lungs. The sounds of the showroom faded away. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. "What did you say?" I whispered. He saw he had hit the target. He pressed harder. "Mom, Lucille." She would be disgusted. She worked her whole life so I could have these things. She wanted me to be happy. She wanted me to fit in. You are hoarding the money she helped make. You are spitting on her memory. He was rewriting history. Lucille was the most frugal, humble woman I had ever known. She patched my work shirts. She clipped coupons until the day she died. But hearing her name in his mouth twisted like that paralyzed me. If Mom were here, she would not let you treat me like this. Tyrell continued, tears welling up in his eyes. He was a good actor. Or maybe he really believed his own lies. She loved me. She would give me the world. You are just a bitter old man who wants to control everything because she left you behind. The pain was physical. It felt like a heart attack. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. He was using the love of my life, the woman I mourned every single day, as leverage to buy a sports car. It was evil. It was purely sociopathic. But it worked. It worked because a part of me, the part that was still grieving, terrified me. What if he was right? What if I was being too hard? What if Lucille would have wanted him to have the car? The doubt crept in like poison. I looked at his face. He looked so much like her. He had her eyes. He had her chin. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. The rage was still there, but it was dampened by the sudden wave of grief. "Stop," I said. My voice was weak. "Just stop." "Then fix this," Tyrell demanded, sensing victory. "Unfreeze the cards, pay the bill, let me have my life." I opened my eyes. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the manipulation. I saw the greed. But I also saw my son. "I will not buy the car," I said firmly. Tyrell opened his mouth to scream again, but I interrupted, holding up a hand. "I will talk. We need to talk. Not here, not in this fishbowl." Tyrell rolled his eyes. "Fine. Dinner. Tonight. At Le Jardin. And bring your checkbook." He did not wait for an answer. He turned and walked out the door, chasing after Victoria. He left me standing there in the middle of the showroom, leaning against the reception desk, surrounded by strangers who were pretending not to stare. The salesman cleared his throat. "Sir, should I keep the card?" I looked at the piece of plastic on the desk. It was just plastic. But it had become a symbol of everything that was wrong between us. "Keep it," I said. "Cut it up." I walked back out to my truck. My hands were shaking so bad I had to use 2 hands to put the key in the ignition. He had used Lucille against me. He had weaponized my grief. I sat in the truck for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I knew I was walking into a trap. I knew dinner tonight would be another ambush. But I had to go. I had to see if there was anything left of my son beneath the layers of entitlement, or if the boy Lucille and I raised was truly gone forever. I put the truck in gear. I would go to dinner. I would give him one last chance. But if he played the Lucille card again, if he tried to dishonor her memory one more time to pay for his vanity, I would not just freeze his accounts. I would burn the whole financial forest down. I drove away from the dealership, the image of the blue Porsche fading in my rearview mirror, but the sting of his words burning fresh in my heart. Tonight would be the deciding factor. Tonight I would find out if I still had a son or if I was just a bank account with a pulse. 45 minutes is a long time to sit alone in a restaurant where a glass of water costs more than an hour of minimum wage. I sat at a small table near the kitchen door, the spot they reserve for customers they want to hide. The waiter, a young man with slicked back hair and a sneer practiced in a mirror, had walked past me 6 times. He did not offer me bread. He did not refill my water. He just looked at my flannel shirt and my work boots and checked his watch, clearly hoping I would realize my mistake and leave before I polluted the atmosphere of Le Jardin any further. I did not leave. I sat there with my back straight, my hands folded on the white tablecloth, and I remembered. The smell of truffle oil and roasted duck wafted from the kitchen, but my mind drifted back to a different smell. The smell of kerosene. It was the winter of 1998. The furnace had died in our drafty apartment, and I could not afford to fix it until my next paycheck cleared. Lucille and I huddled in the living room with Tyrell sleeping between us under 3 blankets. We had 1 can of tomato soup and half a loaf of stale bread. I remember giving Tyrell the soup and eating the bread myself, dipping it in hot water to soften it so it would feel like a meal. I told him I wasn't hungry. I told him daddies don't need as much food as growing boys. I lied. I was starving. My stomach cramped with hunger pangs that felt like knives, but watching him eat that soup with a smile on his face made it bearable. I sacrificed my comfort, my health, and my dignity so that boy would never know the feeling of an empty belly. And now that same boy was 45 minutes late to a dinner he demanded, leaving me to be judged by a waiter who probably had not worked a hard day in his life. The irony was bitter, but I swallowed it like medicine. Finally, the heavy oak doors swung open. Tyrell and Victoria breezed in. They did not look rushed. They did not look apologetic. Victoria looked immaculate in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my first car. Tyrell trailed behind her, holding her purse like a well-trained servant. They walked through the dining room, heads held high, soaking in the attention. When they reached my table, Victoria did not offer a handshake or a hug. She simply pulled out her chair and sat down, checking her reflection in her spoon. "You are late," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Traffic was a nightmare and we simply had to stop at the florist. The shade of hydrangeas they sent was slightly off. We had to correct them." "You understand. Do you not, Monty? Details matter." She did not call me Mr. Hayes. She did not call me Dad. Just Monty, as if I were her gardener. Tyrell sat down, avoiding my eyes. He looked at the menu, instantly hiding behind the leather cover. "Sorry, Dad. It has been a crazy day." The waiter materialized instantly, his sneer replaced by a fawning smile. "Good evening, madame." "Monsieur, may I get you started with some wine?" Victoria smiled at him, and then she began to speak. She spoke in fluent, rapid-fire French. She ordered appetizers, main courses, and specific sides, discussing the vintage of the wine with the waiter, laughing softly at a joke I did not understand. She did not ask me what I wanted. She did not translate. She simply excluded me from the conversation, completely using a language barrier to remind me that I was an outsider in her world. She finished ordering and turned to me with a pitying smile. "I ordered the steak frites for you, Monty. It is meat and potatoes. I figured that is what you are used to. Simple food for simple tastes." I looked at her. Her eyes were blue ice. There was no warmth, only a calculated cruelty. "Thank you, Victoria," I said. She took a sip of water and leaned forward. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, Monty, about the car, about the wedding, you have to understand our position. My family, the Sinclairs, we come from a very long line of distinguished ancestors. My great-grandfather signed the Declaration of Sentiments. We have a legacy to protect." She paused, waiting for me to be impressed. I remained silent. "Tyrell is a wonderful man," she continued, patting his hand. "But he comes from different stock, and you, well, let us be honest, you are a builder. You work with cement and steel. You sweat for a living. It is honorable work, I suppose, for some. But it is not the image we present to the world. Having you at the head table or even in the front row, it sends a confusing message. It suggests that Tyrell is still tethered to that blue-collar life. We want people to see his future, not his past. Tyrell finally looked up. His face was red. Victoria is right, Dad. It is just branding. Think of it as business. You understand business. We are building a brand here. The Hayes-Sinclair merger, we need the launch to be perfect. A brand. He called his marriage a brand. He called his father a liability to his image. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. The grief I had felt in the showroom, the doubt about Lucille's wishes, it all evaporated. Lucille would have hated this. She would have hated this woman who treated people like props, and she would have been heartbroken that our son had become her willing puppet. I reached into the inner pocket of my flannel jacket. I felt the cool metal of my smartphone. I pressed the volume button, twice the shortcut I had set up to start the voice recorder. I needed them to say it. I needed them to admit it clearly, so when the time came they could never twist the truth. So I said, pitching my voice to sound defeated and small. You are saying that my money is welcome, but I am not. You want me to pay for the castle, the dress, the honeymoon, and this dinner, but you want me to stay invisible because I am just a laborer. Is that it? Victoria laughed softly. Oh, Monty, you make it sound so harsh. We just want you to be a silent partner, like an investor who trusts the management team. You provide the capital, we provide the image. It is a win-win. You get to say your son married a Sinclair and we get to live the life we deserve. And you, Tyrell, I asked, looking at my son, is this what you want? You want your father to be a checkbook and nothing else? Tyrell sighed, looking annoyed that I was still asking questions. Dad, come on, do not make this a drama. Yes, okay. Yes, it is better this way. Just pay the bills and let us handle the social side. You're not good at it anyway. You embarrass yourself. There it was, the confession, recorded in high-definition audio, the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I nodded slowly. I looked down at my hands, the hands that had built skyscrapers, the hands that had held him when he had a fever, the hands he was now ashamed of. Okay, I said softly. Tyrell's head snapped up. Okay. You mean, you agree? I understand my place, I said. I am just a builder. I should not stand in the way of your brand. I will take care of the finances. You two enjoy your night. Victoria clapped her hands together, a sound that grated on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. Oh, wonderful. I knew you would see reason, Monty. Tyrell said you were stubborn, but I told him everyone has a price. She signaled the waiter. Garçon, we will take the Chateau Margaux, the 1996 vintage. We are celebrating. The waiter beamed. An excellent choice, madame. $5,000 for the bottle. Bring two, Tyrell said, grinning at me. Let us really celebrate. Thanks, Dad. You are doing the right thing. I watched them high-five across the table. They were drunk on victory, drunk on greed. They thought they had broken the old man. They thought they had won. I stood up slowly. My knees creaked, a reminder of the years of hard labor I had put in for this boy. Where are you going? Tyrell asked, reaching for the bread basket. The food is coming. I lost my appetite, I said. I am going to go home and check the accounts. Make sure everything is ready for your big day. Victoria smiled, already losing interest in me. Perfect. Make sure the transfer for the venue goes through by tomorrow morning. We do not want to lose our reservation. I will take care of everything I promised. I walked away from the table. I walked past the sneering waiter. I walked out the heavy oak doors into the cool night air. I did not look back. Inside, the waiter was uncorking a $5,000 bottle of wine. Inside, my son and his fiancée were feasting on steak and lobster. Inside, they were laughing about how easy it was to manipulate the old bricklayer. But as I started the engine of my Ford truck, I felt a sense of peace I had not felt in months, because I knew something they did not. I had not given the waiter my credit card. I had not opened a tab. And in about 2 hours, when the laughter died down and the bill for $10,000 of wine and food arrived on a silver platter, they were going to realize that the silent partner had just resigned. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward my office. I had a lot of paperwork to do. If they wanted to play business, we were going to play business. And in my business, when you violate the contract, you do not just lose the deal, you lose everything. The recording on my phone was saved. The evidence was secured. The dinner of contempt was over. The war had just begun. The office of Evelyn Wright is not a place for comfort. It is a place for war. Located on the 45th floor of a steel glass tower, it smells of cold brew coffee and expensive leather binding. Evelyn does not offer cookies. She does not offer sympathy. She offers results. I sat across from her at a desk made of black marble that looked like a tombstone. It was 8 in the morning, the day after the disastrous dinner at Le Jardin. I had not slept. I did not need sleep. I needed a strategy. Evelyn slid a single sheet of paper across the cold marble surface toward me. Her manicured fingernail tapped the paragraph highlighted in yellow. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and completely devoid of pity. "You want to hurt them, Monty, or you want to teach them?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but the question was loaded. I looked at the document. It was a draft agreement for the wedding vendors. "I want them to understand the value of $1, I said. "And I want them to understand that my name is not a blank check." Evelyn nodded. She leaned back in her chair. "Then do not cut them off. Not yet. If you cut them off now, they play the victim. They tell the world the mean old father ruined their special day. They cry to the press. They cry to the Sinclairs. You become the villain." I frowned. "So what do I do?" "Keep paying." "No," Evelyn said, a small dangerous smile playing on her lips. "You let them spend. You encourage them to spend. But you change one small detail." She tapped the paper again. "Right now, you are the guarantor. That means if they do not pay, the bank comes for you. We are going to change that. We are going to make Tyrell the primary obligor. You will be the verbal backer. You will tell the vendors you are supporting the wedding. You will tell Tyrell you are covering the costs. But on paper, on the contracts that actually matter in a court of law, Tyrell and Victoria will sign their names as the liable parties." I looked at her. "Will they sign it?" Evelyn laughed. It was a dry sound. "Of course they will. They are arrogant. They think you are a safety net that will never break. They will sign anything to get what they want because they do not believe they will ever actually have to pay." I sat back absorbing the plan. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was perfect. "Do it," I said. "Draft the papers." Evelyn pulled out her phone. "I will call the wedding planner. We will tell her there was a restructuring of your assets for tax purposes. We will tell her that Tyrell needs to sign as the principal to build his credit history, but that the funds are secured by you. It is a lie, of course, but it is a lie they will be desperate to believe." I walked out of her office feeling lighter than I had in days. The trap was set. Now I just needed the mouse to take the cheese. The call came 2 hours later. I was back in my own office reviewing blueprints for a new bridge in Oregon when my phone rang. It was the wedding planner, a woman named Juliana, who spoke with a frantic energy that suggested she was always 5 minutes behind schedule. "Mr. Hayes," she chirped. "So glad I caught you. I just got off the phone with your legal team. They mentioned a change in the billing structure." I leaned back in my chair, putting my feet up on the desk. I channeled every ounce of the warm, doting father I used to be. "Yes, Juliana. Just some boring tax stuff. My accountant says I cannot pay vendors directly this quarter without triggering an audit. You know how the IRS is." Juliana laughed nervously. "Oh, absolutely. So to confirm, Tyrell will be signing the contracts." "That is right," I said, keeping my voice smooth. "He is the groom, after all. It is time he took some ownership. But do not worry about the money. I am right here. I have got his back. You just get him to sign the papers so we can keep this train moving. I want this wedding to be perfect for them." I could hear the relief in her voice. Oh, wonderful. That is all I needed to hear. The Sinclairs have added a few items to the list: a champagne tower, a live string quartet for the cocktail hour, and upgraded linens. It adds another $30,000. Is that approved? I did not hesitate. Approve it all, Juliana. Give them whatever they want. The sky is the limit. I hung up the phone. I could picture the scene happening across town. Juliana running to Tyrell with the good news. Tyrell puffing out his chest, feeling powerful, feeling rich. And indeed, that is exactly what happened. Later that afternoon, I received a notification from the digital signing platform. Tyrell had viewed the documents. I opened the tracking link. I watched in real time as he scrolled through the pages. The contract was dense. It was filled with clauses about non-refundable deposits, cancellation fees, and full liability for the total amount of $550,000. A smart man would have read the fine print. A cautious man would have asked a lawyer to review it. But Tyrell was neither smart nor cautious. He was a man who had been handed everything his entire life. He saw the total, he saw the luxury items listed, and he assumed his father would simply make the problem go away. I watched the cursor move to the signature box. I watched the digital pen trace his name, Tyrell James Hayes, then a second signature, Victoria Elizabeth Sinclair. They had done it. They had legally bound themselves to a debt that was 10 times their annual income. They had signed away their financial future for a party they did not want me to attend. I closed the laptop. The mouse had taken the cheese. The cage door had slammed shut. But the day was not over. Evelyn had one more surprise for me. At 5 o'clock, a courier arrived with a thick manila envelope. It was marked confidential. Inside was the report I had asked for, the background check on the Sinclair family. I had always known they were snobs. I had always known they looked down on me. But I had assumed their arrogance was backed by actual wealth. I poured myself a glass of bourbon and began to read. The report was a revelation. It was a catalog of financial ruin masked by social posturing. The Sinclair family fortune was gone. It had evaporated in bad investments and lavish living decades ago. Their historic estate in Connecticut was mortgaged to the hilt. They had 3 pending lawsuits from former employees for unpaid wages. Their credit cards were maxed out. They were robbing Peter to pay Paul, shuffling debt from one account to another to keep up appearances. I turned the page. And there it was, the motive. Victoria Sinclair was not just marrying my son for love. She probably did not love him at all. The report detailed a series of frantic emails between Victoria and her father, Archibald Sinclair. In one email dated 3 months ago, Archibald wrote, "We need this wedding to happen, Victoria. The Hayes boy is our only way out. His father is worth millions. Once you are married, we can leverage his assets to cover the bridge loan. If this wedding fails, we lose the estate." I lowered the paper. My hands were shaking again, but this time not from anger, from horror. My son was not just a disappointment, he was a mark. He was the victim of a long con. The Sinclairs looked at us, and they did not just see a black family they could look down on. They saw a piggy bank they could smash open. All their talk about aesthetic coherence and tradition was a smokescreen. They did not want me at the wedding because they were afraid I would see through the cracks in their facade. They wanted to keep Tyrell isolated. They wanted him desperate for their approval so he would hand over my money without asking questions. And Tyrell, in his desperation to be accepted by these people, in his desire to shed his own identity and become one of them, had walked right into the slaughterhouse. I finished the bourbon in one gulp. The burning sensation in my throat was grounding. This changed everything. Before I was teaching my son a lesson about gratitude. Now I was saving him from a pack of wolves. He would hate me for what I was about to do. He would scream and cry and call me a monster. But one day, when the smoke cleared, he would realize that the monster was the only one who actually loved him. I picked up my phone and dialed Evelyn. "You were right," I said. "About the contract," she asked. "About everything," I replied. "The Sinclairs are broke. They are using Tyrell to bail them out." There was a silence on the line. Then Evelyn spoke, her voice lower, more intense. "Then we do not just teach them a lesson, Monty. We bury them." "Exactly," I said. "Let the wedding planning continue. Let them invite the senators. Let them invite the press. Let them build this stage as high as they can. Because when I pull the rug out, I want the whole world to hear the crash." I looked at the photo of Lucille on my desk. She was smiling, her eyes full of kindness. "I am sorry, Lucy," I whispered to the empty room. "I cannot be kind right now. I have to be the bad guy to save our boy." I put the report back in the envelope and locked it in my safe. The sun was setting over Chicago, casting long shadows across the city. The darkness was coming. And for the Sinclair family, it was going to be permanent. The ink was barely dry on the wedding contracts when the next demand arrived. It did not come as a request. It came as an expectation. Tyrell called me 2 days after I had authorized the wedding budget. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not thank me for backing the $500,000 party. He simply said, "We need to talk about living arrangements." I sat in my office looking at the structural plans for a suspension bridge and listened to my son explain why the 3-bedroom luxury condo he currently lived in was insufficient. "Victoria says it feels cramped," Tyrell said, his voice echoing slightly as if he were on speakerphone. "She is a Sinclair dad. She is used to space. She is used to grounds. We cannot raise a family in a box in the sky." We need a legacy home. A legacy home. That was a new phrase. I asked him what he had in mind. He sent me a link. It was a listing for a property on the North Shore. A sprawling estate overlooking Lake Michigan, French provincial style, 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a private dock, $3 million. I looked at the price tag. I looked at the photos. It was a beautiful house. It was the kind of house I had dreamed of buying for Lucille 20 years ago before the cancer took her. Tyrell continued. The Sinclairs have a reputation to uphold. If we are going to merge our families, we need a residence that reflects that union. Victoria found this place. It is perfect. We want you to buy it for us. As a wedding gift. He said it so casually. Buy it for us. $3 million. I leaned back in my chair. The old Monty would have lectured him about interest rates and property taxes. The old Monty would have told him to work hard for 10 years and buy it himself. But the new Monty, the man who had read the background report on the bankrupt Sinclair family, saw an opportunity. This was not just greed, this was desperation. The Sinclairs needed a physical asset. They needed a mansion to hide their poverty. If Tyrell owned this house, they could leverage it. They could borrow against it. They could drain the equity to pay off their debts. I smiled at the phone. It was a cold, hard smile. Let us go see it, I said. If it is good enough for a Sinclair, it might be good enough for my son. The viewing was scheduled for the next afternoon. I arrived early. I parked my Ford truck next to the realtor's gleaming Mercedes. Tyrell and Victoria arrived 10 minutes later in a rented Range Rover. They were playing the part of the wealthy couple perfectly. Victoria stepped out of the car wearing oversized sunglasses and a white cashmere coat. She looked at the house, then at me, then back at the house. She did not say hello. She just pointed at the front door. "Well," she said, "let us get this over with." We walked through the heavy double doors into a foyer that was larger than my first apartment. The floors were imported Italian marble. The chandelier was crystal. It was breathtaking. But Victoria was not breathless. She was critical. She walked into the living room, her heels clicking sharply on the stone. She looked at the fireplace, a masterpiece of hand-carved limestone. "This will have to go," she announced. I blinked. "The fireplace?" "It is original from the 1920s. "It is dated," Victoria sniffed. "It looks heavy. We need something modern, something sleek. And these floors," she tapped her toe against the marble. "Too cold. We will rip this all out and put in reclaimed white oak." We moved to the kitchen. It was a chef's dream. Custom cabinetry, professional-grade appliances, granite countertops. Hideous Victoria declared, running a finger along the granite. "Who chose this color? It looks like vomit. We will gut this entire room. I want an all-white kitchen. Minimalist. This is just too cluttered." Room after room, it was the same story. She walked through a palace and saw a teardown. She insulted the architecture. She insulted the finishes. She insulted the very soul of the house. And with every insult, she was insulting me. Because she knew I was a builder. She knew I appreciated craftsmanship. She was telling me without saying the words that my taste was inferior and that she would need to spend another $1 million of my money to fix it. Tyrell followed her like a puppy, nodding at everything she said. "You are right, babe," he said. "Total gut job. But the bones are good. We can work with this." I stood in the library surrounded by walnut paneling that would cost a fortune to replicate today. Victoria was talking about painting the wood white. I looked at Tyrell. He was looking at the lake view, lost in a fantasy of boat parties and cocktails. He did not see the disrespect. He did not care. So Victoria turned to me, crossing her arms. "It needs work. A lot of work. But if we must, we can make it livable. Are you going to write the check, Monty? Or should we keep looking for something that actually meets our standards?" The manipulation was clumsy but effective. She was daring me to say no. She was daring me to be the cheap father who denied them their dream. I looked at the library walls. I looked at the lake. "I will take it," I said. Tyrell's eyes lit up. "Really, Dad? You are buying it?" I nodded. "I will buy it. Today. Cash." Victoria smirked, a small, victorious twitch of her lips. "Well, at least that is settled. We will need the keys by the weekend. I have contractors coming on Monday to start the demolition." I drove to my lawyer's office with a heaviness in my chest. Buying the house was easy. The trap I was about to set was hard. It required me to deceive my son just as he was deceiving me. But I had no choice. If I gave him the deed, The Sinclairs would devour him. Evelyn was waiting for me. On her desk sat 2 stacks of paper. The first stack was the purchase agreement. It listed Montgomery Hayes through Hayes Holdings, LLC as the sole buyer and owner of the property. The second stack was for Tyrell and Victoria. Evelyn held up the second document. It looked official. It looked like a transfer of ownership. It had a gold seal. It had thick bonded paper. But the title at the top did not say warranty deed. It read, Occupancy and Stewardship Agreement. The language inside was brilliant. It stated that Tyrell and Victoria were granted exclusive rights to occupy the property. It gave them permission to make cosmetic changes. It listed them as the residents. To an untrained eye or to an arrogant eye that only sees what it wants to see, it looked like they were being given the house. But in the fine print buried in Section 14, Paragraph C was the truth. It was a month-to-month lease. The rent was set at $0, and the landlord Hayes Holdings, LLC, reserved the right to terminate the agreement and evict the tenants with 24 hours' notice for any violation of the terms. "Are you sure they will not read it?" Evelyn asked, handing me a pen. I signed the purchase agreement. I thought about Victoria looking at the limestone fireplace and calling it hideous. I thought about Tyrell nodding along. "They are too busy planning the demolition," I said. "They will see the $0 rent and they will stop reading." We met them at the title company an hour later. The atmosphere was celebratory. Tyrell was beaming. Victoria was texting on her phone, probably bragging to her friends that she had secured the bag. The title officer, a woman who knew the plan, slid the stack of papers toward Tyrell. "These are the occupancy documents for the new home," she said smoothly. "Just standard disclosures and the agreement between you and Mr. Hayes regarding the property." Tyrell grabbed the pen. He did not read the title. He flipped to the signature page. Victoria glanced at the paper. She saw the number $0 listed under payment due. She smiled. "Just sign it, Tyrell," she said. "We have a dinner reservation at 7. Tyrell signed. Then Victoria signed. They signed their names with a flourish, confident that they had just become the owners of a $3 million estate. They laughed as they capped the pen. "Thanks, Dad," Tyrell said, shaking my hand. "You really came through. This place is going to be the perfect start for us." I looked at my son. I felt a wave of sadness so profound it almost choked me. He was shaking the hand of the man who held the eviction notice in his pocket. He thought he was a king, but he was just a squatter in a gilded cage. "You are welcome, son," I said. "Son, enjoy the view." Victoria stood up, grabbing the keys the title officer had placed on the table. "We will," she said. "Do not worry, Monty. We will invite you over once we have fixed everything you bought. We cannot have you seeing it in this state." They walked out of the office, keys jingling, high-fiving each other as they reached the elevator. I stayed behind with Evelyn and the title officer. The room was quiet. "Did you see that?" Evelyn asked softly. They did not even look at the first page. "Greed blinds people," I said. I looked at the signed contract. The lease was active. The trap was armed. Now they had the wedding contract signed, making them liable for $500,000. And they had moved into a house they did not own, preparing to spend money they did not have on renovations I would eventually inherit. I stood up and walked to the window. I could see them down on the street getting into their Range Rover. They were driving off to a life of illusion. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tyrell. "Hey, Dad, since we saved money on the house, Victoria wants to look at a new diamond necklace for the reception. Can we unlock the card again?" I stared at the screen. The appetite of these people was bottomless. I typed back a single sentence. "Focus on the house, son. We will talk later." I put the phone away. There would be no diamond necklace. There would be no more handouts. The countdown had begun. They had the house. They had the wedding plans. They were climbing higher and higher up the ladder I had built for them. And they had no idea that I was the one holding the saw at the bottom. The bridal salon was called L'Amour, a name that promised romance but delivered only invoices. It was located in the most expensive district of the city, a place where the air smelled of lavender and exclusion. I walked in with my checkbook in my pocket, ready to play the part of the dutiful, obedient father one last time. According to the plan Evelyn and I had devised, I was supposed to pay the initial deposit for Victoria's custom Vera Wang gown today. It was a $25,000 gesture of goodwill designed to lull them into a false sense of security before the trap snapped shut. The interior of the shop was a blinding white. White marble floors, white velvet curtains, white orchids in crystal vases. It felt less like a store and more like a temple dedicated to vanity. The sales associates moved like silent ghosts in black dresses, their eyes scanning every customer for the telltale signs of wealth. When I entered wearing my clean but simple button-down shirt and slacks, their gazes slid over me with practiced indifference. I was not the target demographic. I was just the wallet. I approached the front desk intending to pay and leave as quickly as possible. I had no desire to see Victoria or her mother Meredith. I wanted to keep this transaction clinical, but fate, it seemed, had a different script in mind. Just as I reached for my wallet, a familiar shrill laugh cut through the hushed atmosphere of the salon. It was a sound that reminded me of breaking glass. Meredith Sinclair. I froze. The sound was coming from the private viewing suite, a large room separated from the main floor by heavy velvet drapes that were partially drawn. I should have rung the bell on the counter. I should have announced my presence. But a feeling in my gut, a cold, heavy stone of dread, told me to stop. I stepped away from the counter and moved silently toward the gap in the curtains. I was a man who had spent his life on construction sites learning how to walk on steel beams without making a sound. I moved into the shadows of a large display of veils and listened. Victoria was standing on a pedestal in the center of the room. She looked like a princess in a cloud of silk and lace. The dress was magnificent, I had to admit. It was a masterpiece of design. But the person wearing it made it look ugly. She was turning slowly, admiring herself in the trifold mirrors while Meredith sat on a plush sofa sipping champagne, and there, sitting in the corner like a forgotten accessory, was Tyrell. He was scrolling on his phone, looking bored, looking detached. "The dress is perfect, darling," Meredith purred, swirling her glass. "Simply divine. It screams old money. No one will ever guess that we are restructuring." Victoria giggled. "It better be perfect. It costs more than Monty's truck." They both laughed. It was a mean-spirited sound. "Speaking of Monty," Meredith said, her voice dropping an octave but becoming sharper, more venomous. "Have you figured out the timeline for the transition?" "What transition?" Tyrell asked, not looking up from his phone. "The disposal." Meredith corrected him. "You know what I mean, Tyrell. We cannot have him hanging around forever. Once the wedding is over and the house is legally secured in your name, we need to address the living situation." I leaned closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What do you mean?" Tyrell asked. Meredith sighed as if explaining something simple to a slow child. "Oh, Tyrell, use your brain. We are Sinclairs. We have a reputation. We cannot have that man showing up at the estate whenever he pleases. He is, well, look at him. He smells like wet cement and cheap coffee. He is loud, he is unrefined, and let us be honest, he is the wrong color for the country club." I stopped breathing. I had faced racism my entire life. I had been called names on job sites. I had been denied loans. But hearing it from the woman who was about to become my son's mother-in-law, hearing it spoken so casually in a room full of silk and satin, felt like a physical blow. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what came next. "We need a plan," Meredith continued. "I have a friend who runs a facility in the suburbs. It is a state-funded nursing home. It is not glamorous, but it is adequate. Once you have power of attorney over his assets, which you should get immediately after the wedding, we can declare him incompetent, or at least unable to manage his affairs. We put him in the home, sell his penthouse, and use the money to refurbish the estate properly." She took a sip of champagne. "Plus, I do not want him around the grandchildren. Imagine him trying to teach them how to mix concrete. It is horrifying." I waited. I waited for Tyrell to stand up. I waited for him to throw his chair across the room. I waited for him to scream that his father was a hero, a man who built bridges and skyscrapers, a man who sacrificed everything for him. I waited for my son to defend my honor, my humanity, my right to exist in his life. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Then Tyrell spoke. "Yeah," he said. His voice was flat, indifferent. "Yeah," Meredith pressed. "You agree?" Tyrell shrugged. He finally looked up from his phone, but not with anger, with annoyance. "Look, I know he is embarrassing, okay? I know he does not fit in. I see the way people look at him. It bothers me too. My knees almost buckled. I had to grab the velvet curtain to stay upright." So, Tyrell continued, "You are right. We cannot have him at the house all the time. Victoria deserves better. I deserve better. We will handle it. Maybe not a nursing home right away that might look bad legally, but we can limit his access. We can make him understand he is not welcome. And if he gets difficult, well then, we do what we have to do. He wants to be useful, Victoria chimed in, adjusting her veil. So let him be useful. Let him pay for everything, and then let him disappear. That is the best kind of father, isn't it? The kind that leaves a check and walks away. Tyrell laughed. Yeah, exactly. Just keep the checks coming, old man. He laughed. My son laughed at the idea of using me, discarding me, and locking me away so I wouldn't contaminate his new life. Something inside me died in that moment. It was not a metaphorical death. It was a physical sensation. I felt the last thread of hope, the last fiber of paternal love snap. The image of the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders dissolved. The memory of teaching him to ride a bike faded to black. The pride I felt at his graduation turned to ash. The man sitting in that chair was not my son. He was a stranger. He was a parasite. He was a monster created by my own generosity. I did not storm into the room. I did not yell. I did not give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain. They did not deserve my anger. They did not deserve my voice. I turned around. I walked back toward the front counter. My steps were heavy, but my mind was clear. The fog of grief had lifted, replaced by a cold, crystalline resolve. The sales associate at the counter looked up. She smiled a practiced, plastic expression. "Mr. Hayes," she asked, "we have the invoice ready for the deposit, $25,000. Would you like to use the card on file?" I looked at her. I looked at the credit card terminal. I looked at the white orchids. "No," I said. She blinked, confused. "No, you mean you want to write a check?" "I mean no," I repeated. My voice was steady. It sounded like a judge reading a sentence. "I am not paying for the dress." Her eyes widened. "But, sir, the order is already in production. Miss Sinclair is in the fitting room right now. If you do not pay the deposit, we have to cancel the order." "Cancel it," I said. "But," she stammered, "it is a custom gown. We cannot just—" "Cancel it," I said again, louder this time, "and delete my credit card information from your system. Permanently." I pulled out my checkbook. I opened it and wrote a check. I wrote it for $25,000. The salesgirl looked relieved. "Oh, thank goodness. You had me worried for a second." I tore the check out of the book, but I did not hand it to her. "Do you know the St. Jude's Home for Boys?" I asked. She stared at me blankly. "The orphanage?" "Yes. It is a few blocks over." I looked at the check. I had written St. Jude's Home for Boys in the payee line. "This money is not for a dress," I said. "This money is for children who do not have parents, because as of 5 minutes ago, I do not have a son." I placed the check on the counter. "Mail this for me, will you?" I asked. The girl was speechless. Her mouth hung open. I turned and walked toward the glass doors. I could still hear the faint sound of laughter coming from the back room. They were laughing about their clever plan. They were laughing about the future they thought they had secured. Let them laugh. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the city street. The air tasted different out here. It tasted clean. It tasted like freedom. I took a deep breath. My chest hurt, but it was a healing pain. It was the pain of a bone being reset so it could grow back stronger. The war was no longer a plan. It was a reality. I took out my phone and dialed Evelyn. "Execute the next phase," I said. "Already?" Evelyn asked. "Did something happen?" "Everything happened," I said. And Evelyn, "Yes, Monty. Call the nursing home board, the one I donate to every year. Tell them I am doubling my contribution. I want to make sure it is a very nice place, because I have a feeling some members of the Sinclair family might need a room there sooner than they think." I hung up the phone and walked to my truck. I did not look back at the bridal shop. I did not look back at the past. I put the truck in gear and drove away, leaving my son and his bride to dance in the ashes of the bridge they had just burned. The silence in the private fitting room of the bridal salon was shattered not by a scream, but by the sharp metallic sound of a zipper being pulled down. Just moments ago, Victoria Sinclair had been standing on the pedestal admiring her reflection and dreaming of the photos that would grace the society pages. She had been twirling in the $25,000 Vera Wang gown, imagining herself as the Queen of Newport. But the fantasy had dissolved the moment the sales manager walked back into the room. The manager did not smile. She did not offer champagne. She held a credit card receipt in her hand, and her face was as cold as the marble floor. Ms. Sinclair, the manager, said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "We have a problem. The deposit payment has been declined. In fact, the check provided by Mr. Hayes was not for this dress. It was made out to a charity. And the card on file has been removed from our system." Victoria froze. Her hands flew to her throat, clutching the pearl necklace. "That is impossible," she hissed. "My father-in-law just left. He paid for it. He said he would pay for it. Check it again. We have checked it," the manager replied, stepping closer. "There is no payment. And per our store policy, no merchandise leaves the rack without a 50% deposit, especially not a custom piece like this. I am afraid I am going to have to ask you to step out of the gown." Victoria's face flushed a deep crimson. "Now, but I am not done fitting. I have not even chosen the veil. Just run the card again. My fiancé will fix this." The manager signaled to two assistants who stepped forward with grim determination. They were not there to assist. They were there to repossess. "The dress is property of the store until paid for," the manager stated. "Please step down from the pedestal. We have other clients waiting who actually have the funds to make a purchase." The humiliation was absolute. Victoria was not allowed to go back to the changing stall. The assistants began to undo the buttons right there in the middle of the viewing room. One by one, the silk-covered buttons were unfastened. The dress, which had felt like armor just minutes ago, now felt like a prison suit. Victoria stood there trembling with rage as the heavy fabric was peeled off her shoulders. She was left standing in her Spanx and her strapless bra, exposed and vulnerable. The cold air of the salon hit her skin, but it was the cold stare of the staff that truly froze her. They were looking at her not with envy, but with pity. They saw through the facade. They saw a woman who tried to buy class with someone else's money and failed. She snatched her street clothes from the chair and dressed frantically, her hands shaking so hard she could barely button her blouse. She stormed out of the shop, tears of pure fury streaming down her face, ruining her professional makeup. She did not cry because she was sad. She cried because she had lost face. And for a Sinclair, losing face was worse than losing a limb. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. I was sitting in my truck parked by the lake, watching the waves crash against the concrete barrier. I knew who it was before I looked at the screen. Tyrell. I let it ring 3 times. I needed to compose myself. I needed to bury the sharp, confident Monty who had just canceled the check and become the confused, stumbling old man they wanted me to be. I cleared my throat, forcing a tremor into my voice. "Hello," I answered, sounding distracted. "Tyrell. Is that you, Dad?" Tyrell screamed into the phone. His voice was so loud I had to pull the device away from my ear. "What the hell did you do? Victoria just called me hysterical. She is sobbing. The bridal shop kicked her out. They said you didn't pay. They said you wrote a check to an orphanage. Are you insane? You embarrassed her in front of the entire staff." I took a deep breath. This was the performance of a lifetime. "Oh, son," I said, my voice wavering. "Oh dear, did that happen?" I am so confused. I went to the counter and I thought I was paying for the dress. But then I remembered the letter from the charity, and I must have mixed up the checks. You know how my eyes are getting. And the card machine was so complicated. I tried to put the numbers in, but I think I forgot the PIN. I just got overwhelmed, Tyrell. There were so many lights and mirrors. Tyrell stopped screaming. The anger in his voice was replaced by frustration and condescension. "Oh my God, Dad, you mixed up the checks. You forgot the PIN. It is your birthday. How can you forget your birthday?" "I don't know," I stammered, playing the part perfectly. "My mind just feels so foggy lately. The doctor said I need to rest." "I am so sorry, Tyrell. I did not mean to upset Victoria." "Is she very mad?" Mad Tyrell laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "She is mortified, Dad. She thinks you did it on purpose. But I told her you are just getting old. I told her you are losing your touch." Hearing him say those words hurt more than I expected. He was so ready to believe I was incompetent. He was so eager to write me off as a senile burden so he wouldn't have to face the reality that I was punishing him. I rubbed my forehead. "I am sorry, son. Tell her I am sorry. I will go to the bank right now. I will sit down with the manager and get it all sorted out. I will make sure the money is transferred directly so I don't mess it up again. Just give me a few hours. Tyrell sighed loudly. Fine, go to the bank and fix this, Dad. Victoria is threatening to cancel the rehearsal dinner if this isn't resolved. Do not make me look like a fool again. I won't, son, I promised. I won't let you look like a fool. I hung up the phone. The tremor in my voice vanished instantly. My hand was steady as I placed the phone on the dashboard. They bought it. They believed the lie because it suited their narrative. If I was just a confused old man, then they were justified in taking control of my assets. They were justified in putting me in a home. I had just given them the ammunition they needed to pull the trigger on their plan to remove me. But what they didn't know was that the gun was pointing backwards. On the other side of town, Tyrell was doing exactly what I predicted. He hung up the phone and turned to Victoria, who was sitting in his car wiping her eyes with a tissue. He is losing it, Tyrell said, shaking his head. He mixed up the checks. He forgot his PIN. It is worse than we thought. Mom was right. We need to expedite the guardianship paperwork. Victoria sniffed, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. Well, he better fix it. I cannot show my face in that shop again. We will have to hire a private stylist to go get the dress. And Tyrell, yeah, babe. This stress is ruining my complexion, and the guest list looks thin. If we want to bury this embarrassment, we need to go bigger. We need to distract people. Tyrell nodded, his ego bruised, but his arrogance intact. You are right. If people hear about the dress incident, they will think we are broke. We need to show them we are flush. He pulled out his phone. I am going to invite Senator Miller and the CEO of Blackwood Tech, and I will upgrade the champagne package to the vintage Dom Perignon. We will make the reception so lavish that no one will remember a stupid credit card glitch. But we are already over budget, Victoria warned, though she didn't look worried. My dad is going to the bank right now, Tyrell said confidently. He feels guilty. He knows he messed up. He will sign whatever check I put in front of him to make up for this. He is terrified of losing us, Victoria. He is terrified of being alone. We have him right where we want him. They drove off toward the country club, already spending money that didn't exist, planning a party that would never happen. Back at my house, the sun had set. The house was dark, save for a single lamp on my desk. I sat there looking at a framed photograph of Lucille. It was taken on our 25th anniversary. She was wearing a simple blue dress, and her smile was radiant. She looked at me with so much love, with so much trust. I picked up the frame and ran my thumb over her glass-covered face. I am sorry, Lucy, I whispered to the empty room. My voice cracked, and this time it wasn't acting. I am so sorry. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was a hot, heavy tear. I have to break his heart, Lucy. I have to humiliate him. I have to let him hit the absolute bottom. Because if I don't, if I bail him out one more time, he will be lost forever. He will become a man who sells his soul for a country club membership. He will become a man who locks his own father away to please a woman who hates him. I set the photo down. The house was silent. It was the silence of a battlefield before the first shot is fired. I stood up and walked to the window. I could see the city lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, Tyrell was making calls, upgrading liquor packages, promising grandeur to people who didn't care about him. He was digging his own grave with a shovel made of gold. I had bought him time. I had told him I was going to the bank. And I would go to the bank, but not to transfer funds. I was going to the bank to ensure that when he swiped that card on his wedding day, the only thing he would receive was a message of insufficient funds. The lesson was no longer about money. It was about survival. I was going to destroy the son I raised to save the man he could still become. Good night, Tyrell. I whispered to the darkness. Enjoy your champagne. It will be the last expensive drink you taste for a very long time. I turned off the lamp. I sat in the dark and waited for the morning. The final act was about to begin. The Newport Castle stood on the cliff edge like a fortress of stone and ego. It was a place built to intimidate, with high turrets that scraped the gray sky and heavy iron gates that screamed exclusivity. The fog was rolling off the Atlantic Ocean, wrapping the grounds in a cold, damp embrace, but inside the courtyard, the air was warm with the scent of expensive lilies and the sound of a string quartet warming up. I walked through the side entrance, my footsteps heavy on the cobblestones. I was not supposed to be here. I had been banned. I had been erased from the guest list. But I was a father before I was a banned guest. and a father does not give up on his child without one final, desperate attempt at salvation. In my pocket, my hand was wrapped around a small blue velvet box. It was old. The velvet was worn at the corners, faded from years of being touched. Inside was not something I had bought with my millions. It was not a diamond I had picked out from a catalog to impress the Sinclairs. It was a small silver brooch shaped like a dove with a tiny sapphire for an eye. It had belonged to Lucille. She had worn it on our wedding day, pinned to a dress she had sewn herself. She had worn it when she held Tyrell for the first time. It was the only piece of jewelry she had asked to be buried with, but at the last moment I had kept it. I had kept it for this day. I had kept it to pin on the lapel of my son's tuxedo, a symbol that his mother was walking with him, that he came from love, not just from labor. I told myself that if Tyrell accepted this gift, if he looked at it and showed even a flicker of the boy he used to be, I would stop the war. I would cancel the orders with the bank. I would pay the $500,000. I would swallow my pride and let them have their fantasy. This was his last chance. This was the final test. I stepped into the main hall. It was transformed. The stone walls were draped in white silk. Thousands of white roses hung from the ceiling in cascading waterfalls. It was breathtaking, and it was hollow. In the center of the room, standing on a raised platform, were Tyrell and Victoria. They were practicing their vows. The officiant, a man with a voice like melted butter, was reading from a script. Tyrell looked handsome in his tuxedo, but he looked small next to the towering floral arrangements. Victoria was directing the lighting crew with hand signals while the officiant spoke, completely ignoring the solemnity of the moment. I took a step forward. My shoes clicked on the marble floor. The sound echoed. The string quartet stopped playing. The lighting crew froze. Victoria turned around. Her eyes landed on me, and for a second there was silence. Then her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was not annoyance. It was not frustration. It was the look one gives to a rat that has scurried across a banquet table. "Stop the music," she screamed. Her voice tore through the elegant room, shattering the mood instantly. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "Get him out of here. How dare you? How dare you come here and pollute this space?" Tyrell turned. He saw me. His face went pale. "Dad." I walked toward the platform. I did not run. I did not shout. I walked with the dignity of a man who had built the foundations of this city. I pulled the blue velvet box from my pocket. "Tyrell," I said, my voice calm but carrying across the silent hall. "I brought you something. It is Mom's." Victoria did not let him answer. She stormed down the steps of the platform, her heels clicking like gunshots. "We do not want your trash, Monty," she shrieked. "Look at you. You are wearing a cheap suit. You are sweating. You are ruining the aesthetic. This is a closed rehearsal. Security. Where is security?" Two large men in black suits materialized from the shadows. They were not the polite ushers I had hired for company events. They were hired muscle. They looked at me, then at Victoria. "Remove him," Victoria commanded. "Throw him in the street." The guards stepped forward. One of them grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, painful. He dug his fingers into my bicep, treating me like a criminal, like a trespasser in a world I could buy and sell 10 times over. I jerked my arm, but he held tight. "Get your hands off me," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't make this difficult, old man." The guard sneered. "You heard the lady. You are not welcome." I looked at Tyrell. He was still standing on the platform. He was watching two strangers manhandle his father. He was watching the man who taught him to walk being dragged away like garbage. "Tyrell," I called out. The desperation in my voice was real. "Look at me, son. Tell them to stop. Tell them I am your father." Tyrell looked at me. Then he looked at Victoria. She was glaring at him, her arms crossed, daring him to defy her. She was the gatekeeper to the life he wanted. She was the key to the acceptance he craved. Tyrell looked back at me. I saw the struggle in his eyes. I saw the memory of fishing trips and baseball games fighting against the promise of country clubs and social status. I held up the blue box. "For Mom, Tyrell. Just take it." Tyrell closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were cold. They were dead. "You are making a scene, Dad," he said. His voice was quiet, but it echoed louder than Victoria's scream. "Just go. You do not belong here." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You do not belong here." He turned his back. He actually turned his back on me. He looked at the officiant and nodded. "Continue, please." The guards pulled me. I did not fight them anymore. There was nothing left to fight for. The hope I had carried in my chest, the hope that was heavier than the steel beams I used to lift, evaporated. It was replaced by a void. A cold, dark, infinite void. They dragged me to the heavy oak doors. They pushed me out. I stumbled on the cobblestones, catching myself on the iron gate. "Stay out!" The guard spat and slammed the heavy doors shut. The sound of the latch clicking into place was the final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. I stood alone in the courtyard. The fog had thickened. The cold dampness seeped into my bones. I looked at the blue velvet box still clutched in my hand. I opened it. The silver dove looked up at me, its sapphire eye glinting in the gray light. Lucille's dove, the symbol of peace, the symbol of love. It was a lie. There was no peace. There was no love. There was only greed and the rotting stench of betrayal. I walked over to a large industrial trash can positioned near the catering entrance. It smelled of rotting fish and old champagne. I looked at the brooch one last time. "I am sorry, Lucille," I whispered. "He is not ours anymore." I dropped the box into the trash. It fell with a soft thud, landing on a pile of discarded shrimp shells. I did not look away. I watched it sit there surrounded by filth. That was where my sentimental heart belonged, in the trash. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. The trembling had stopped. The sadness was gone. I felt a strange, terrifying clarity. I was no longer a father. I was a CEO, and I was about to execute a hostile takeover. I opened the messaging app. I found the thread with Evelyn Wright. I typed 3 words that would burn their world to the ground. Execute Plan B. I hit send. I watched the message deliver. I watched the status change to read. A moment later, Evelyn replied, "Done. May God have mercy on them." I stared at the screen. Mercy was a luxury I could no longer afford. I turned around and walked toward my truck. The music from inside the castle started up again. They were resuming the rehearsal. They were practicing their vows, to have and to hold for richer or for poorer. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that was swallowed by the fog. They were about to find out exactly what poorer meant. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. I did not drive home. I drove to the nearest cliff overlook. I parked the truck and sat there watching the waves crash against the rocks below. I needed to watch something being destroyed. I needed to see nature's violence to match the violence in my own heart. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow was the day they would stand before God and lie to each other. And tomorrow was the day the check would bounce. The sun began to set, casting a blood-red light across the water. The rehearsal was over. The real show was about to begin. And I had the best seat in the house, the seat of the executioner. The sun rose over the Newport coastline like a golden coin, but for my son Tyrell it was a coin he could not spend. The morning of the wedding was supposed to be a symphony of preparation. It was supposed to be the sound of champagne corks popping and silk rustling. Instead, it was defined by a suffocating silence. The castle was awake, but the machinery of luxury had ground to a halt. Tyrell sat on the edge of the 4-poster bed in the bridal suite. He was wearing his silk robe, the one with his initials embroidered in gold thread. In his hand, his phone was the heaviest object in the world. He refreshed the banking application. The little wheel spun round and round, mocking him. It loaded. The balance stared back at him. $0 and 0 cents. He blinked, hoping it was a glitch. He swiped down to refresh again. 0. He checked the time. It was 7:45 in the morning. The vendors were scheduled to start the final setup at 8. The wire transfer from the bank meant to cover the remaining balances was supposed to clear at midnight. It had not cleared. Across the room, Victoria was sleeping with an eye mask on. She was breathing deeply, dreaming of her coronation. She had no idea that the kingdom had already fallen. Tyrell stood up and walked to the window. He looked down at the courtyard. The delivery trucks were there. The florists were there. The caterers were there. But they were not unloading. They were standing in small clusters, looking at their clipboards and talking on their phones. Their body language was not industrious. It was agitated. Tyrell felt a cold sweat break out on his back. He dialed the bank again. Automated voice. "We are sorry, but your call cannot be completed at this time." He dialed my number. Voicemail. The first domino fell at exactly 8 o'clock. It started with the transportation. A fleet of vintage Rolls-Royces had been hired to transport the bridal party and the VIP guests from the hotel to the castle. The lead driver, a man named Frank, who had been driving for 30 years, checked his mobile payment terminal. He tapped the screen. He frowned. He walked over to the castle intercom where Tyrell was watching from the window. "Mr. Hayes," Frank said, his voice amplified by the speaker system. "We have a problem. The pre-authorization for the fleet just bounced. The status says guarantor withdrawn." Tyrell pressed the talk button, his hand shaking. "Just wait, Frank. It is a banking error. My father is sorting it out. Just give us an hour." Frank shook his head. He did not look angry. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had heard every excuse in the book. "I am sorry, Mr. Hayes. Company policy. No clearance, no keys. We have another booking in Boston. If the funds are not here in 5 minutes, we roll." 5 minutes passed. The funds did not appear. Tyrell watched in horror as the engines of the 6 vintage cars roared to life. They did not drive through the gates. They reversed. One by one, the shining silver symbols of wealth turned their backs on the castle and drove away down the winding cliff road. The driveway was left empty, save for the swirling fog. That was the signal. The other vendors were watching. When the transport left, the panic set in. At 8:30, the string quartet leader packed away her cello. She had received a notification on her phone. The contract stated that full payment was due before the first note was played. She walked to the main door where Tyrell had run down to intercept her. "Please," Tyrell begged. He was barefoot in the courtyard. "Please, just set up. I will write you a personal check. I have cash in the room." The woman looked at him with pity. "I am sorry, Tyrell. Your personal checks are not verified, and we do not take cash on the day of. We need the wire from the primary guarantor. That is the contract you signed." She signaled to her team. They loaded their instruments into their vans. The silence they left behind was louder than any music. The main hall, which should have been filled with Vivaldi, was now filled only with the sound of Tyrell's ragged breathing. Then came the death blow. The kitchen. At 9 o'clock, the executive chef wiped his hands on his apron. He walked over to the gas range where a massive pot of lobster bisque was beginning to simmer. He reached out and turned the dial. The flame flickered and died. He turned to his sous chefs. "Pack it up." Tyrell burst into the kitchen. The smell of the extinguished gas was heavy in the air. "What are you doing?" he screamed. "The guests arrive at 1. You have to cook." The chef was a large man, a man who took pride in his work, but took more pride in paying his staff. He crossed his massive arms. "Mr. Hayes, I just got off the phone with the bank. The account linked to this event has been frozen, not just empty. Frozen. Flagged for suspicious activity and lack of guarantor support." Tyrell grabbed the chef's arm. "My father is the guarantor. Montgomery Hayes. He is good for it. You know who he is." The chef pulled his arm away. "I know who he is, and I know that 20 minutes ago his legal team sent a formal notice to all vendors stating that he has withdrawn his verbal backing and that all financial liability rests solely with you." Tyrell stepped back as if he had been punched. "Withdrawn." The chef nodded. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. "It says here that due to a breach of personal conduct, the guarantor has severed ties with the event. It also says you signed a clause accepting full liability, so unless you have $75,000 in your pocket right now to cover the food cost and the staff wages, we are leaving." Tyrell patted his robe pockets. He had nothing. He had zero. The kitchen staff worked efficiently. Within 20 minutes, the lobsters were packed back into ice chests. The truffles were boxed. The expensive cuts of beef were wheeled out to the truck. The kitchen, which had been a hive of activity, was now dark and cold. Tyrell stood in the center of the empty kitchen. He looked at the cold stove. He looked at the empty counters. The reality crashed down on him. There would be no food. There would be no music. There would be no cars. And then he heard the scream. It came from the bridal suite. It was a high, piercing shriek that sounded like an animal in a trap. Victoria. Tyrell ran up the stone stairs, taking them 2 at a time. He burst into the room. Victoria was standing in front of the vanity mirror. She had woken up. She had checked her phone. She had seen the emails from the florist and the decorator. Cancellation, cancellation, cancellation. She turned to face Tyrell. Her face was a mask of horror. She had started applying her makeup, but the tears were streaming down her face, creating black rivers of mascara that ran down her cheeks and dripped onto her white silk robe. She looked like a melting wax figure.
"You lied to me!"
She screamed, throwing a bottle of perfume at him. It shattered against the wall, filling the room with a sickly sweet scent. "You said he would pay. You said you had him under control." Tyrell held up his hands. "Babe, please listen. He is doing this on purpose. He is trying to scare us." "He is not trying," Victoria howled. "He is doing it. Look at my phone, Tyrell. The florist is gone. The hair and makeup team just texted saying they are not coming because the deposit was pulled back. I am sitting here with half a face and no wedding." She lunged at him, clawing at his chest. "Fix it! Fix it right now, or I swear to God I will destroy you!" Tyrell pushed her away gently, but she was possessed by a demon of vanity. She fell back onto the bed, sobbing hysterically, ruining the expensive sheets with her makeup. Tyrell retreated to the balcony. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped his phone twice before he could dial. He called me again, and again, and again. "Dad, pick up," he whispered into the phone, his voice cracking. "Please pick up. I am sorry. I will do anything. Just pick up." The phone rang and rang and rang until the automated voice cut in. At that exact moment, 20 miles away, the water of the lake was glass. The air was crisp and smelled of pine needles and damp earth. I sat on a folding chair on the end of a wooden dock. My fishing line was cast out into the deep water, the red and white bobber floating peacefully on the surface. My phone was sitting on the tackle box next to me. It vibrated. It buzzed. The name Tyrell flashed on the screen. I reached for my thermos and poured a cup of hot coffee. I watched the steam rise up into the cool air. I heard a bird singing in the trees behind me. It was a beautiful morning. I looked at the phone. I saw the desperation in the flashing light. I imagined the chaos at the castle. I imagined the silence of the empty kitchen. I imagined the mascara running down Victoria's face. I took a sip of coffee. It was strong and black, just the way I liked it. I did not reach for the phone. I let it ring. I let it vibrate until it danced across the lid of the tackle box. The bobber on the water dipped below the surface. A fish was biting. I picked up the rod. I felt the tug of the line. It was a strong pull. A fighter. I reeled it in, slowly enjoying the struggle. "Sorry, son," I said to the empty lake. "I am busy. I am catching something real." I landed the fish, a beautiful bass. I unhooked it carefully and admired its scales in the sunlight. Then I tossed it back into the water. "Live to fight another day," I whispered. My phone stopped ringing. The battery had finally died, or maybe Tyrell had finally realized that no one was coming to save him. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. The sun felt warm on my face. For the first time in months, I felt like a father who had done his job. I had stopped enabling the monster. I had cut the cord. The castle was falling. And I was just sitting here enjoying the view. The panic in the courtyard of the Newport Castle had shifted from a simmer to a rolling boil. It was the kind of desperation that smelled of fear and sweat, cutting through the scent of the expensive lilies that were currently being loaded back into the florist's van. Tyrell and Victoria were no longer the regal couple standing on a pedestal. They were beggars in couture. Tyrell was running from one vendor to another, holding a fan of credit cards in his shaking hand. These were not the black cards backed by my empire. These were the personal cards, the emergency cards, the cards with limits that would barely cover the cost of the appetizers. He grabbed the arm of the lighting director. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Just run this one. It is a Visa. I have 5,000 on it. That covers the setup fee, right? Just turn the lights back on. My father is fixing the wire transfer. It is just a delay." The lighting director looked at the card, then at Tyrell. He looked at the frantic groom with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Kid," he said, pulling his arm away, "the setup fee is 10,000, and I am not turning a single spotlight on until I see the full balance. We heard about the bank freeze. We are not working for free." Across the courtyard, Victoria was screaming at her mother. Meredith Sinclair, the matriarch who claimed to be royalty, was frantically digging through her Chanel purse. She pulled out a checkbook. "I will write you a personal check," Meredith announced to the gathered vendors, waving the booklet like a flag. "I am a Sinclair. My name is good in this town," the head caterer, a man who had been stiffed by high society types before, laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said, leaning against his empty truck. "Your name might be good at the bridge club, but at the bank your credit score is lower than the temperature in my freezer. We ran a check on the family account when the main guarantor pulled out. You have 3 liens against your estate. Your check is just a piece of paper with a lie written on it. Meredith gasped, clutching her pearls. How dare you? I will have you blacklisted. You can blacklist us all you want, the caterer replied, signaling his team to lock the truck. But right now we are leaving. Good luck feeding 300 guests with air. Tyrell dropped his hands to his sides. The cards slipped from his fingers and scattered on the cobblestones. He looked at Victoria. Her makeup was ruined. Her hair was coming undone. The dream was dissolving in real time. They had drained every personal account, maxed out every limit, and it was not enough. They were drowning in a sea of debt, and the water was rising fast. And then the sound of tires on gravel cut through the shouting. Everyone turned toward the main gate. A sleek black sedan glided into the courtyard. It moved with the silent authority of a predator. Behind it was a sheriff's vehicle, its lights flashing silently in the morning fog. Tyrell's face lit up with a desperate, delusional hope. "It is Dad," he shouted. "He sent someone I knew. I knew he wouldn't let this happen." He ran toward the black car as it came to a halt. The driver's door opened, but it was not me who stepped out. It was a driver in a dark suit. He walked around and opened the rear passenger door. Evelyn Wright stepped out. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a tailored gray suit that cost more than Tyrell's car. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses. She held a leather briefcase in one hand and a court order in the other. Behind her, 2 sheriff's deputies stepped out of their vehicle, adjusting their belts. They did not look like they were there to celebrate a wedding. Tyrell stopped in his tracks. He knew Evelyn. He knew she was my shark. "Evelyn," Tyrell gasped, breathless. "Thank God. Dad sent you to fix the bank error, right? Tell these people to get back to work. Tell them the money is coming." Evelyn took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and completely devoid of warmth. She looked at Tyrell, then at the chaotic courtyard, and finally at Victoria, who was huddled near the fountain. "Hello, Tyrell," Evelyn said. Her voice was calm, cutting through the noise like a scalpel. "Your father did send me, but I am not here to fix a bank error. There is no bank error." Tyrell blinked, confused. "What? What do you mean?" "The accounts are frozen. The accounts are secured," Evelyn corrected. "Your father has simply ceased his voluntary contribution to this event, which, as per the contracts you signed, leaves you solely responsible. But that is not why I am here." She gestured to the castle looming behind them, the massive stone structure that Tyrell had bragged about for months. "I am here representing the ownership of this property," Evelyn stated. Victoria stepped forward, wiping her eyes. "The Sinclairs have been friends with the owners for decades. The Vanderbilts own this castle. I will call them. They will not let you ruin my day." Evelyn allowed a small, icy smile to touch her lips. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a document stamped with the official seal of the county recorder. "Actually, the Vanderbilts sold this property 48 hours ago," Evelyn said. "It was a private transaction. Cash. Immediate closing." She held up the deed. "The new owner is Hayes Infrastructure, specifically a holding company solely owned by Montgomery Hayes." The silence that fell over the courtyard was absolute. Even the seagulls seemed to stop screaming. Tyrell stared at the paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "My father," he whispered. "My father owns the castle." "He does," Evelyn confirmed. "He bought it to ensure that the venue would be managed with the highest standards of integrity." She turned to the sheriff's deputies and nodded. "And as the legal representative of the owner, I am here to enforce a specific clause in the rental agreement. Section 9, paragraph C, the Moral Conduct and Respect Clause." Victoria scoffed, trying to regain her footing. "Moral conduct? We haven't done anything immoral. We are just trying to get married." Evelyn turned her gaze to Victoria. It was a withering look. "The clause states that the renters must show absolute respect and deference to the property owner and his agents. Yesterday, during the rehearsal, the property owner visited these grounds. He was verbally abused, physically assaulted by security personnel acting on your orders, and forcibly removed from the premises." I paused in my narration, letting the weight of that memory settle. They had thrown me out of my own building. They had evicted the landlord. Evelyn continued, her voice rising slightly so everyone could hear. Banning the owner from his own property, insulting him, and physically assaulting him constitutes a gross violation of the rental agreement. Therefore, Hayes Infrastructure is exercising its right to immediate lease termination. Tyrell looked like he was going to vomit. You are canceling the wedding. We are evicting you, Evelyn said. The wedding is incidental. She checked her watch. It was a platinum Rolex, a gift I had given her after she won a major lawsuit for me 5 years ago. It is now 10 o'clock. Guests begin arriving at 11. You have exactly 60 minutes to vacate the premises. That includes all personal belongings, all decorations, and all personnel not employed by Hayes Infrastructure. No, Victoria shrieked. She sounded like a banshee. You cannot do this. The guests are coming. Senators are coming. This is insane, Sheriff Evelyn said, stepping back. Please ensure the property is vacated. If they are not gone in 60 minutes, you are authorized to arrest them for trespassing. The deputies stepped forward. One of them, a large man with a mustache, rested his hand on his belt. You heard the lady, folks, the deputy said. The party is over. Start packing. Tyrell looked at Evelyn. His eyes were wide with terror. Evelyn, please. Call him. Call my dad. Let me talk to him. I will apologize. I will do anything. Evelyn looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He is not taking calls, Tyrell. He is fishing. And honestly, after the way you treated him yesterday, I doubt he ever wants to speak to you again. She turned and walked back to the black sedan. She did not look back. She sat in the back seat and began working on her phone, leaving Tyrell and Victoria standing in the ruins of their arrogance. The chaos that followed was beautiful in its tragedy. The vendors, realizing that the groom was not just broke but also evicted, moved with lightning speed. They wanted to get their equipment out before the police locked the gates. Tables were overturned. Chairs were stacked aggressively. The flowers that had not yet been packed were dumped into trash bags. Victoria was running around screaming orders that no one followed. Do not touch that arch. That is imported silk. Lady, a worker shouted back, hauling the arch toward his truck. Unless you have cash, this belongs to me. And right now, you are trespassing. Tyrell sat down on the cold cobblestones. He put his head in his hands. He was surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. The castle walls loomed over him, silent and judgmental. He was sitting on land owned by the father he had betrayed, waiting to be kicked out by the police force paid by the taxes his father contributed to. Meredith Sinclair was on her phone trying to call the guests, trying to spin a lie. Yes, Senator, she was saying, her voice trembling. There has been a structural issue at the castle. A gas leak. Yes, very dangerous. We have to postpone. Please do not come. But it was too late. The guests were already en route. The Rolls-Royces and Bentleys of the elite were winding their way up the cliff road. They were coming to see a wedding. Instead, they were going to witness an eviction. I watched it all from the security cameras on my tablet. I sat on my dock, the fishing rod in my hand, and watched the tiny figures on the screen scramble like ants whose hill had been kicked over. 60 minutes, I whispered to myself. I reeled in my line. It was time to go. I had one final appearance to make. I needed to be there when the clock struck 11. I needed to see their faces when the master of the house returned to claim what was his. I packed up my tackle box. I walked to my truck. I adjusted my tie in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but I looked strong. The boy I raised was gone. The man who remained had a job to do. I started the engine. The finale awaited. The timing was mathematical. It was 11 o'clock, exactly when the first wave of luxury sedans began to wind their way up the cliffside driveway. These were not just cars. They were rolling statements of power. Bentleys with tinted windows. Mercedes Maybachs gleaming in the sun. The invite list that Victoria had curated so carefully was arriving to witness her triumph. Instead, they were driving straight into a crime scene of broken dreams. I watched from the back seat of my own vehicle as the first car pulling a senator whose campaign I had once donated to slowed to a crawl at the main gate. The senator stepped out expecting a glass of champagne and a red carpet. What he found was Tyrell sitting on a stack of plastic crates holding his head in his hands. What he found was Victoria screaming at a sheriff deputy who was calmly writing her a citation for disturbing the peace. The courtyard looked like a war zone. The beautiful white silk drapes that had adorned the stone walls were piled on the ground in dirty heaps. The floral arches lay on their sides like fallen giants. The catering trucks were gone, leaving behind only tire tracks and the smell of exhaust. The guests stood by their cars confused and horrified. They adjusted their ties and clutched their designer purses, looking at each other with that specific panic rich people get when they are close to something messy. They did not step forward to help. They stepped back. They whispered. I saw the senator pull out his phone, probably calling his PR team to make sure he wasn't photographed near this disaster. Tyrell saw them. He scrambled to his feet, wiping his face. He tried to run toward the cars, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Senator," he called out, his voice cracking. "So glad you made it. Please ignore the mess. We had a slight logistical issue. Just a misunderstanding with the management. We are sorting it out right now." The senator looked at Tyrell. He looked at the deputies standing guard. He looked at the eviction notice taped to the heavy oak doors. He did not smile back. He looked at Tyrell with the cold, detached gaze of a man who realizes he has bet on a losing horse. Then came the silence. It rippled through the crowd, starting at the gate and moving inward. The whispering stopped. The shouting stopped. Even Victoria stopped screaming. A single car was moving through the crowd. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, jet black and polished to a mirror shine. It moved slowly, parting the sea of confused guests like a shark swimming through a school of fish. It did not stop at the gate. It drove straight into the center of the courtyard, right up to the steps of the castle. The driver got out. He was a large man in a sharp suit. He walked around to the rear door. He opened it. I stepped out. I was not wearing my work boots. I was not wearing my flannel shirt. I was wearing a bespoke tuxedo, midnight blue with a silk lapel. I stood tall. My spine was straight. My chin was high. I looked every inch the billionaire owner of Hayes Infrastructure. I looked like the man who owned the ground they were standing on. I buttoned my jacket and walked up the stone steps. I walked past Tyrell, who was staring at me with his mouth open. I walked past Victoria, whose face had gone from red to a ghostly white. I walked past the deputies, who nodded at me with respect. I stood on the top step, the highest point in the courtyard. I turned to face the crowd. The driver handed me a wireless microphone. The feedback whined for a split second, a sharp noise that grabbed everyone's attention. Then I spoke. My voice boomed across the courtyard, echoing off the stone walls. "Good morning, everyone!" Victoria snapped out of her shock. She let out a feral growl. She lunged toward the stairs. "You!" she shrieked. "You did this! You ruined everything! Get off my stage!" She ran at me, her hands clawed into talons, ready to scratch the eyes out of my head. She was a woman possessed by the demons of humiliation. She never reached me. Two deputies stepped in front of her. They did not grab her gently. They blocked her path like a wall of blue uniform. "Ma'am, step back." The deputy ordered, his hand resting on his taser. "This is your final warning." Victoria collided with the officers, bouncing back. She looked up at me, panting, her hair wild, her eyes crazy. "I hate you," she screamed. "I hate you." I looked down at her. I did not feel anger. I did not feel hate. I felt nothing. She was just a tenant who had violated her lease. I turned my attention back to the crowd. The guests were watching with rapt attention. This was better drama than any wedding. "I am Montgomery Hayes," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I am the owner of this estate, and I am the father of the groom." A murmur went through the crowd. They knew the name Hayes. They knew the bridges. They knew the skyscrapers. They looked at me with new eyes. "I regret to inform you," I continued, "that there will be no wedding today. The couple you came to celebrate has been evicted due to a gross violation of moral conduct and a failure to meet financial obligations." The crowd gasped. I saw Meredith Sinclair cover her face with her hands. "However," I said, raising my voice slightly to cut through the murmurs, "a great deal of food has been prepared. The kitchen staff worked all night. The lobsters were flown in from Maine. The steak is prime-aged beef. It would be a sin to let it go to waste." I looked at the senator. I looked at the CEOs. I looked at the socialites. But this food was paid for by the sweat of honest labor. It was paid for by money earned on construction sites and in factories. So it is only fitting that it is eaten by those who understand the value of a hard day's work. I gestured to the perimeter of the courtyard where the catering staff, the drivers, the security guards, and the florists were standing watching the scene unfold. "I invite all the staff," I announced, "the drivers who brought these cars, the deputies who are keeping the peace, the cleaning crew, the kitchen staff. Please come inside. The banquet hall is open. The bar is open. Lunch is on me. For a moment no one moved. Then a driver near the back took off his cap. He smiled. He started walking toward the castle doors. Then a florist joined him. Then the deputies. The elite guests stood there frozen. They had been uninvited. They had been replaced by the help. The senator looked at me. He nodded slowly, a gesture of grudging respect. Then he turned to his driver. "Take me home," he said. One by one, the luxury cars began to turn around. They did not look at Tyrell. They did not look at Victoria. They looked through them. The Sinclairs had committed the ultimate social sin. They had been exposed as frauds. They were not just broke. They were tacky. And in their world, being tacky was a death sentence. Tyrell stood alone in the middle of the courtyard. The guests were leaving. The staff was entering the castle laughing and talking, ready to feast on the meal he was supposed to eat. He looked up at me. His eyes were filled with tears. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, please." I looked at him. I looked at the son who had banned me. I looked at the son who had sent me a bill. I turned off the microphone. I handed it back to the driver. I turned my back on him. I walked through the heavy oak doors into the castle where the people who actually mattered were waiting to eat. I heard the sound of Tyrell sobbing behind me. It was a lonely, desolate sound. But I did not stop. I had a lunch to host, and for the first time in a long time I was going to enjoy the company. The air in the castle smelled of lobster and justice, and it was the sweetest smell I had ever known. The silence that descended on the Newport Castle was heavier than the stone walls themselves. It was the silence of a tomb. The last of the Bentleys had disappeared down the cliff road, carrying with them the reputation of the Sinclair family. The dust from their tires was still settling on the expensive silk suits of the few people left behind. The social execution was complete. Inside the castle, I was sharing a lobster tail with the head of security, but outside the walls, the real horror show was just beginning. The rumors had already started to spread before the cars even reached the highway. I could imagine the text messages flying between the senators and the CEOs. "Did you see that? Did you see the eviction notice? The Sinclairs are destitute. They tried to scam the old man." It was the kind of gossip that stains a family name forever. In the world of the elite, being poor is a sin, but being publicly exposed as a fraud is a capital offense. Victoria Sinclair was no longer the golden girl of Connecticut society. She was now a cautionary tale. She sat on a stone bench near the empty fountain. She was not crying anymore. She was staring into the middle distance with a hollow shell, shocked expression. Her mother Meredith was pacing back and forth frantically, trying to call people who were no longer answering their phones. The bridge club members, the charity board directors, the country club manager. One by one the calls went to voicemail. The social network that had sustained the Sinclair ego for decades had been severed in less than an hour. They were radioactive. Tyrell stood apart from them. He was looking at the ground, kicking at a loose cobblestone. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The arrogance that had fueled him for months was gone, replaced by a terrifying clarity. He was beginning to realize that the stage had collapsed and there was no safety net underneath. But the humiliation was only the first wave. The tsunami was the financial reality that was about to crash down on his head. The vendors who had packed up their equipment were not leaving quietly. They were business owners. They had lost a day of revenue. They had incurred costs, and they had contracts. The head of the catering company walked up to Tyrell. He did not look sympathetic. He held a clipboard in his hand. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice flat and professional, "we need to settle the account before we leave." Tyrell looked up, blinking in confusion. "Settle the account, but you didn't serve the food. You packed it up." The caterer nodded. "We did. But the food was purchased, the staff was hired, the trucks were rented, and according to the contract you signed, the cancellation fee for an event terminated on the day of is 100% of the total estimate plus a penalty for breach of contract." He ripped the top sheet off the clipboard and handed it to Tyrell. "That is $75,000 for the catering alone." Tyrell took the paper. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. $75,000. But I don't have $75,000. My father, the caterer cut him off. "Your father is not on the contract. You are. We checked the digital signature. It is your name, Tyrell James Hayes, listed as the primary obligor. Your father was a verbal backer only, and since he withdrew his backing, the debt falls to you. Before Tyrell could process this, the florist stepped forward. "40,000 for the flowers," she said, handing him another invoice. "Since the arrangements were custom and cannot be resold, you owe the full amount." Then came the lighting director, 10,000 for setup and tear down. Then the valet company, 5,000 for the fleet reservation. Then the musicians, 8,000 for the booking fee. One by one, they piled the invoices into Tyrell's arms. He stood there holding a stack of paper that represented his complete destruction. He looked like a child trying to hold back a landslide with his bare hands. "Wait," Tyrell stammered. "Please, there has to be a mistake. The total here, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars." The caterer pulled out a calculator. He punched in the numbers. "With the late fees and the penalties and the legal fees that will be added if you do not pay within 24 hours, the total comes to just under $300,000. $300,000. Tyrell looked at Victoria. She was looking at the stack of bills with horror. "You signed it," she hissed. "You told me your father was covering it. You said it was just a formality." Tyrell looked at me. I was watching from the high window of the castle tower, a glass of iced tea in my hand. He could not see me, but I could see him. I could see the moment the realization hit him. I had warned him. Evelyn had warned him. We had told him to read the contracts. We had told him that he was the responsible party. But he had been so blinded by greed, so eager to play the big man, that he had signed his life away without reading a single word. I am legally untouchable. My name was nowhere on those papers. I had promised to help verbally, but in the court of law, a verbal promise is worth the paper it is written on, which is nothing. I had set the trap, but he had walked into it and pulled the lever himself. "I will sue you," Tyrell shouted at the vendors, his voice shrill with panic. "I will sue all of you." The caterer laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "You can try, kid. But our lawyers are already filing the liens against your assets. Good luck finding a lawyer who will take your case when you have 0 credit and 300 grand in debt." The vendors walked away, leaving Tyrell holding the paper tombstone of his financial future. Victoria stood up. She smoothed her dress, trying to regain a shred of dignity. "We are leaving," she announced. "Tyrell, get the car. We are going to the lake house." The lake house, their sanctuary, the $3 million estate that Tyrell thought he owned. It was their last refuge. If they could just get behind those heavy gates, they could hide from the world. They could regroup. They could figure out a way to manipulate me back into helping them. They got into the Range Rover. Tyrell drove. He drove fast, tearing down the cliff road as if he could outrun his problems. I finished my iced tea. I picked up my phone and sent a text to the private security firm I had hired to watch the lake property. "They are coming. Secure the perimeter." I walked down to my car. I wanted to be there for the final act. I wanted to see the moment they realized that they were not just broke. They were homeless. I took a different route, driving slowly, enjoying the scenery. By the time I arrived at the Lake House estate, Tyrell's Range Rover was already parked at the main gate. But the gate was not open. Tyrell was standing at the keypad, punching in the code. 1234. Nothing happened. The red light on the keypad blinked, mocking him. He punched it again, harder. "Open, damn it," he screamed, kicking the iron bars. Victoria was leaning out of the car window. "What is wrong? Why is it not opening?" Tyrell ran to the pedestrian gate. He tried his key. The key went in, but it did not turn. The locks had been changed. He rattled the gate, shaking the iron bars like a prisoner trying to escape. "Hey," he shouted. "Is anyone in there?" "Open the gate." "It is Tyrell. I live here." A security guard stepped out from the gatehouse. He was a large man wearing a uniform that said Hayes Infrastructure Security. He did not open the gate. He walked up to the bars and looked at Tyrell through the metal. "Mr. Hayes," the guard said calmly, "you do not live here." "What are you talking about?" Tyrell spit flying from his mouth. "I own this house. My father bought it for me. I signed the papers." The guard held up a piece of paper. He taped it to the iron bars. It was a copy of the occupancy agreement, the one Tyrell had signed without reading. Section 14. Paragraph C, the guard recited. "The landlord reserves the right to terminate the month-to-month lease with 24 hours notice for any violation of terms, or immediately upon evidence of financial insolvency or criminal trespass on other company properties." The guard pointed to the bottom of the page. "Your lease has been terminated, effective immediately. This property is now a secured asset of Hayes Infrastructure. You are trespassing." Tyrell stared at the paper. He saw his signature. He saw the $0 rent clause. He saw the termination clause. It was a lease. It was always a lease. He had never owned it. He had been a guest in his own fantasy. Victoria got out of the car. She ran to the gate, pushing Tyrell aside. "My clothes are in there," she screamed. "My jewelry, my life." "You cannot keep my things." "Your personal effects have been packed," the guard said, pointing to a stack of cardboard boxes sitting outside the gate on the wet grass. "Everything is there. We inventoried it. You have 5 minutes to load it and leave before I call the county sheriff." Tyrell walked over to the boxes. He opened one. Inside were his designer suits, his watches, his shoes. They were just things, piles of expensive fabric and leather that meant nothing without a roof to put them under. He looked at the house in the distance, the beautiful French provincial mansion overlooking the lake. The windows were dark. It looked like a fortress that had closed its drawbridge. He looked at Victoria. She was sitting on the ground next to a box of her shoes, crying. She was not crying for him. She was crying for the house. She was crying for the address. Tyrell looked at me. I had parked my car down the road, watching from a distance. He saw my silhouette. He did not run to me this time. He did not scream. He just stood there on the side of the road, surrounded by cardboard boxes and debt. He realized then that I was not coming to save him. He realized that the safety net was gone. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the road. The air was getting cold. They had no money. They had no credit. They had no home. They had burned every bridge, including the one that led back to me. Tyrell picked up a box. He walked back to the Range Rover. "Get in," he said to Victoria. His voice was dead. "Where are we going?" she asked, looking up at him with mascara running down her face. "I don't know," he said. He put the box in the trunk. He got into the driver's seat. They sat there for a long time. Two people who thought they were royalty sitting in a rented car on the side of the road with nowhere to go. I watched them until they finally started the engine and drove away, slowly disappearing into the darkness. I signaled the guard. "Good work." I drove home to my penthouse. The city lights were beautiful tonight. I sat on my balcony and poured a glass of wine. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I was at peace. I had destroyed my son's life. And in doing so, I had given him the only chance he had to build a real one. The slate was clean. The debt was real. The struggle was about to begin. And for the first time in his life, Tyrell Hayes was going to have to be a man. The week that followed the eviction was a slow burn of misery for the Sinclair legacy. I did not have to hire a private investigator to know what was happening. The implosion was so loud it could be heard across the entire city. Victoria Sinclair did not handle poverty with grace. She handled it like a trapped animal chewing off its own leg to escape a trap. They had retreated to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, using the last few $100s on a credit card that hadn't yet been canceled. It was a place where the neon sign buzzed all night and the sheets smelled of stale cigarette smoke. It was a far cry from the French provincial estate overlooking the lake. I sat in my office reviewing the final reports from the wedding fiasco. The total debt Tyrell faced was staggering, but the emotional bankruptcy was far worse. On the 7th day, the inevitable happened. Victoria filed for an annulment. She did not do it quietly. She screamed it in the parking lot of that motel while Tyrell stood there holding a bucket of fried chicken he had bought for their dinner. "You are useless," she had shrieked, her voice cracking with venom. "You are a fraud, Tyrell. You promised me a life of luxury. You promised me the estate. And look at us. We are living in a dump. You are nothing without your father's money. Nothing." Tyrell had tried to reason with her. He had tried to tell her that they could rebuild, that they had each other, that love was supposed to conquer all. "Love!" she laughed, spitting on the asphalt near his feet. "I did not marry you for love, Tyrell. I married you because you were supposed to be my golden ticket. I married you to save my family. You were an investment, and you failed. You are a bad investment, and I am cutting my losses." She got into a taxi she had called, leaving him standing there in the rain. She did not look back. She did not say goodbye. She just left him with the debt and the silence. That was the moment the illusion finally shattered. That was the moment Tyrell realized that the woman he had sacrificed his father for, the woman he had insulted his heritage for, had never actually seen him. She had only seen a checkbook. And now that the checkbook was closed, she was gone. He spent the next 2 days alone in that motel room, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a miracle that wasn't coming. He waited for me to call. He waited for the Sinclairs to call. But the phone remained silent. Hunger eventually forced him out. Desperation eventually forced him to swallow the last jagged shards of his pride. It was a Tuesday evening when my doorbell rang. I was sitting in my favorite armchair reading a book about Roman architecture. The house was quiet and warm. I checked the security camera. It was Tyrell. He did not look like the man who had stood on the wedding platform in a tuxedo. He looked like a ghost. His clothes were wrinkled and stained. He hadn't shaved in a week. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 days. I opened the door. He stood there shivering slightly even though it wasn't cold. He looked at me and then he looked at the floor. He couldn't meet my gaze. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was broken, a raspy sound of defeat. I stepped back and opened the door wider. I did not hug him. I did not smile. I simply gestured for him to enter. He walked into the living room, the room where he had grown up. He looked around at the familiar furniture, the photos on the mantel, the stability he had taken for granted. He collapsed onto the sofa. He didn't sit. He collapsed. He put his face in his hands and began to sob. It wasn't the angry crying of the wedding day. It was the deep, gut-wrenching sobbing of a man who has lost everything, including himself. "She left me, Dad," he choked out between sobs. "She called me useless. She said she never loved me. She just wanted the money. You were right. You were right about everything." I stood by the fireplace and watched him. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I shoved it down. Sympathy had almost ruined him. He didn't need sympathy right now. He needed reality. I am sorry to hear that I said my voice neutral. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "I have nothing, Dad. The vendors are suing me. The bank is chasing me. I have nowhere to live. I have no car. I have no wife. I am drowning. Please. I am begging you. Help me." He slid off the sofa onto his knees. My son, the Ivy League graduate, the man who wanted to be a socialite, was on his knees on my rug, begging like a child. "Just write a check, Dad," he pleaded. "Just pay off the vendors. I will pay you back. I swear, I will get a job. I will do anything. Just make the pain stop. Please, I am your son." I looked down at him. This was the moment. This was the crossroads. I could write the check. I could end his suffering in 5 seconds. I had the money. It would be easy. We could hug, we could cry, we could pretend this never happened. But if I did that, I would kill him. I would kill the man he could become. I would teach him that there are no consequences. I would teach him that Daddy always fixes the mess, and the next time he fell, he would fall harder. I walked over to the closet near the hallway. I opened the door. I reached up to the top shelf. I pulled out a box. I walked back to Tyrell. He was looking at me with hope in his eyes. He thought I was getting the checkbook. I dropped the box on the floor in front of him. It landed with a heavy thud. He looked at the box. He opened it. Inside there was no money. There was no check. Inside was a pair of heavy leather work gloves, a bright yellow hard hat, and a pair of steel-toed boots. He stared at the items confused. "What is this?" he asked, looking up at me. "This is my offer," I said. He blinked. "I don't understand." "You want help?" I said, my voice hardening. "You want a way out of the hole you dug. This is it." I pointed to the boots. "I have a project starting next week in Alabama. It is a bridge repair. Dirty work, dangerous work, hot work. We are short on laborers." "Laborers." Tyrell repeated the word, tasting like ash in his mouth. "Yes, laborers," I said. "Carrying rebar, mixing concrete, digging ditches, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week." But Dad, Tyrell stammered, getting to his feet. "I have a degree. I am an educated man. I cannot be a laborer. People will laugh at me." "Let them laugh," I said, stepping closer to him. "Let them laugh the way they laughed when you tried to buy their respect with my money. You have no degree right now, Tyrell. You have no status. You are a man with $300,000 of debt and 0 assets. You are starting from the bottom." I kicked the box toward him. "The pay is minimum wage. You will live in the crew bunkhouse. You will eat in the mess hall. Every dollar you earn will be garnished to pay your creditors. I have already set it up with legal. You will keep $50 a week for personal items. The rest goes to the debt." Tyrell looked at me with horror. "Minimum wage. Dad, it will take me 10 years to pay this off." "Then you better start early," I said. He looked at the gloves. He looked at his soft manicured hands. "I can't do that," he whispered. "It is too hard." "Then leave," I said, pointing to the door. "Walk out that door and figure it out yourself. Go back to the motel. Go back to the lawsuits. Go to jail for fraud. It is your choice." The room was silent. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Tyrell looked at the door. He looked at the cold, dark night outside. He knew what was out there. Hunger, shame, fear. Then he looked at the gloves. They were ugly. They were rough, but they were real. They were an opportunity, not a handout, an opportunity. He looked at me. He was searching for a sign of weakness, searching for the dad who used to give him ice cream when he scraped his knee. But that dad was gone. The dad standing in front of him was the foreman, the boss, the builder. "I am offering you a lifeline, son," I said softly. "It is a rough rope. It will burn your hands. It will make you bleed. But it is the only rope that will pull you up. The choice is yours." Tyrell stood there for a long minute. His chest heaved. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked at the door one last time. Then he slowly bent down. He picked up the hard hat. He picked up the gloves. He picked up the boots. He held them to his chest like a shield. "When do I start?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The bus leaves at 5 a.m. tomorrow," I said. "Don't be late." He nodded. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say I love you. He just nodded. He turned and walked toward the guest room. He walked with a limp, with the weight of the world on his shoulders. But he was walking. He wasn't kneeling anymore. I watched him go. My heart was breaking inside my chest. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to tell him it was a test. I wanted to give him the money. But I stayed rooted to the spot. I gripped the back of the armchair until my knuckles turned white. This was love. This was the hardest, purest form of love. It was the fire that burns away the rot. I turned off the lights in the living room. I sat in the dark listening to the sounds of my son in the next room packing his bag for Alabama. He was going to hate me tomorrow. He was going to hate me for a long time. But one day when he stood on a bridge he helped build with his own hands, he would understand. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer to Lucille. "Watch over him, Lucy. The boy is gone. But the man is just being born." The Alabama sun does not negotiate. It beats down on the red clay earth with a ferocity that turns the air into a physical weight. On a bridge repair site just outside of Birmingham, the noise is deafening. Jackhammers tear into old concrete. Cranes groan under the weight of steel beams. Dust covers everything, coating the world in a layer of grit that tastes like iron and sweat. In the middle of this organized chaos, there is a laborer. He is wearing a bright yellow hard hat that is already scratched and scuffed. His safety vest is stained with grease. His work boots, the ones I gave him in my living room, are covered in mud. This man is number 419 on the payroll, but his name is Tyrell Hayes. If you looked closely at him, you would struggle to recognize the boy who stood in a tuxedo demanding $500,000 for a party. That boy was soft. That boy had hands that had never held anything heavier than a champagne flute. This man has blisters on his palms that have burst and hardened into calluses. His face is dark from the sun and streaked with sweat. He is thinner. The soft edges of luxury have been burned away by 12-hour shifts and manual labor. He is currently using a shovel to clear debris from a drainage ditch. It is back-breaking work. His muscles scream with every movement. A year ago, he would have quit in 5 minutes. He would have called a lawyer. He would have called me. But today, he does not stop. He wipes his forehead with a dirty rag, drinks from a warm plastic water bottle, and keeps digging. During his lunch break, he sits on a cooler with the other men. They are rough men. Men with histories, men who do not care about last names or bank accounts. They are eating sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Tyrell eats his bologna sandwich with a hunger he never felt at the 5-star restaurants he used to frequent. He pulls out his phone. It is a cheap prepaid model. He checks his balance. He has earned $600 this week. $500 went to the debt collectors. $50 went to room and board. He has $50 left. He looks at the screen. For the first time in his life, the number 50 represents something real. It represents 40 hours of sweat. It represents value. He does not look happy. He looks tired. He looks weathered. But when he looks up at the bridge he is helping to fix, there is something new in his eyes. The arrogance is gone. The entitlement is gone. In their place is a quiet, terrifying focus. He is no longer waiting to be saved. He is saving himself one shovel of dirt at a time. Hundreds of miles away in a diner that smells of burnt coffee and despair, Victoria Sinclair is learning a different lesson. The Sinclair family did what they always do when a limb becomes infected. They cut it off. After the scandal at the castle, after the debts were made public, her parents disowned her. They blamed her for the ruin of their reputation. They cast her out to save their own social standing. She is wearing a polyester uniform that is 2 sizes too big. She is carrying a tray of dirty dishes. Her hair, once perfectly styled, is pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her nails are short and unpainted. A customer at table 4 snaps his fingers at her. "Hey, honey, where is my refill?" Victoria flinches. The old Victoria would have thrown the drink in his face. The new Victoria simply nods her head down and walks to the coffee pot. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." She has no husband. She has no estate. She has no legacy. She is living the life she tried so hard to avoid, the life of a person who has to serve others to survive. She looks out the window at the cars driving by, and for a brief moment she wonders where Tyrell is. She wonders if he is suffering like she is, but she pushes the thought away. She does not have the luxury of nostalgia. She only has the next shift and the next tip. Back in Chicago, the autumn leaves are falling, covering the ground in a blanket of gold and crimson. It is a quiet afternoon at the Oak Hill Cemetery. The wind whispers through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and memory. I am standing in front of a simple granite headstone. It is clean and polished. A bouquet of fresh white lilies. Lucille's favorite sits in the vase. I trace the letters of her name with my finger. Lucille Marie Hayes, beloved wife and mother. I take a deep breath. The air is cold, but it feels good in my lungs. I did it, Lucy. I speak to the stone, my voice soft and private. I did what we promised we would never do. I broke him. I pause, waiting for the guilt to come. But it does not come. I know you always wanted to protect him. You wanted to shield him from the harshness of the world because we had it so hard. You wanted his life to be easy, and I honored that for a long time. Too long. I look at the trees swaying in the wind. But easy was killing him, Lucy. Easy turned our boy into a monster. It turned him into a man who would sell his own father for a seat at a table where he wasn't wanted. It turned him into a man who measured love in dollars. I kneel down, brushing a stray leaf off the grass. He is in Alabama now. He is working. He is sweating. He hates me right now. I know he does. He curses my name every time he lifts a bag of cement. He thinks I abandoned him. I smile a sad, crooked smile. But I didn't abandon him. I gave him the greatest gift a father can give. I gave him the truth. I gave him the chance to find out who Tyrell really is when the credit card is declined and the audience is gone. I stand up, my knees cracking slightly. I received a letter from the site foreman yesterday. He says Tyrell is quiet. He says he keeps to himself, but he says Tyrell is the first one on the site in the morning and the last one to leave. He says the boy is learning how to tie rebar. I feel a swell of pride in my chest. It is a small, fragile flame, but it is there. He is building bridges, Lucy, just like I did. He is starting over, and maybe, just maybe, when he pays off that last dollar of debt, he will walk back through my front door, not as a beggar, not as a prince, but as a man. I touch the top of the stone one last time. Rest easy, my love. I am holding the line. I walk away from the grave, leaving the lilies to stand guard. The path out of the cemetery winds through the trees, leading back to the world of the living. I walk with a lighter step. The burden of the past few months has lifted. Later that afternoon, the sun is setting over the lake. The water is painted in shades of violet and orange. I am sitting on my dock, the same dock where I ignored Tyrell's desperate calls on his wedding day. But today, I am not alone. Sitting next to me is Frank, my old head of security, the man who helped me lock the gates of the estate. And next to him is Evelyn, my lawyer, who has traded her power suit for a fishing vest. We are not talking about business. We are not talking about lawsuits or evictions. We are talking about bait. We are talking about the weather. "Got a bite," Frank yells, reeling in his line. We laugh. It is the deep, hearty laughter of people who have seen the worst of human nature and survived it. I look out at the water. I think about the empty castle on the hill. I think about the silence in my penthouse. Many people would look at my life and say I lost. They would say I lost my son. They would say I lost the dream of a happy family. They would say I am a lonely old man with nothing but money. But they would be wrong. I pull my line in checking the hook. I did not lose a son. I lost a parasite. I lost a fiction. I lost a version of my child that was hollow and rotten. And in exchange, I saved a soul. Tyrell is suffering today. He is tired. He is sore. but he is alive. He is real. And for the first time in his life, he is earning his sleep. I cast my line back into the water. The splash ripples outward, expanding in perfect circles. I have hope. It is a distant hope, but it is there. I hope that one day, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, a truck will pull up to this dock. I hope a man with calloused hands and gray in his hair will step out. I hope he will walk down this wooden plank, sit in the empty chair next to me, and cast his own line. He won't ask for money. He won't ask for a car. He will just look at the water and say, "Hello, Dad. The fish are biting today." Until that day comes, I will be here. I will be waiting, I will be fishing, and I will be enjoying the peace that comes from knowing I did the right thing, no matter how much it hurt. This is Montgomery Hayes signing off. Now I want to ask you a question. If you were in my shoes, would you have bailed him out, or would you have handed him the shovel? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice and tough love, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I share stories about the reality of life, the price of greed, and the power of standing your ground. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most loving hand is the one that lets you fall so you can learn how to stand up. See you in the next story. This journey taught me that the most dangerous gift a parent can offer is a life without consequences. For years, I used my wealth as a shield, thinking I was protecting Tyrell. In reality, I was robbing him of his own strength. I learned that true love is not about funding a fantasy of entitlement, but about having the courage to let your children face the storm alone. By cutting the financial cord, I didn't destroy my son. I liberated the man buried beneath the greed. Sometimes the hardest no is the greatest act of love you will ever perform. If you believe that respect must be earned and not bought, please hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice, redemption, and the raw truth of life. See you in the next video.